Okay, all set.
You good?
All good.
All right. Roger, we're going. All right, so welcome to the Berlin Select Board open meeting. Today is Monday, March 10th. It is later, which is awesome. Calling the meeting to order at 6:01. So as in the other weeks, we're gonna skip out to do an executive session, but we'll be back. Hope to be back at the latest by 7, but we will get going on other business if we come back early. So to read this, the board will enter into an executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exception 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, town administrator, and will return to open session to further conduct its regular business meeting. All right, Mr. Hawkins, can I have a vote to go out?
Hawkins, yes.
And Stone Eye. All right, we will be back. Thank you for your patience. Are we gonna put up any type of sign?
So you made the motion and he seconded.
Yes.
Yes. And then we both voted on it.
And then we both voted. Oh. That's so cute. Okay. Is that one of the frames that you bought when you were trying to figure out what to do with the board?
What, you worried about what I'm writing? No, we gotta keep an eye on you. I thought maybe it wasn't right. Wow, that's not what I have, nobody. All right. I'm getting used to what's been on.
Later.
You put quite a, yeah. And then I've got the other one somewhere here for when we do budget.
Shoo-be-doo-be-doo.
Where's your partner in crime?
Susan, she'll be here
Yes.
probably
Oh,
at 7.
okay. I told the crew from CMRPC that we wouldn't take them before 7, so I said, you're welcome to come in or
Yeah.
hang there, whatever you want.
Ugh. Blame Ken.
Blame him for any days, such a helpful good person.
Say hawk and die and just.
Mm-hmm.
Way too loose.
Obstacle course,
Obstacle
Yeah.
course.
my cord, your cord, my jacket, my water.
If you make it through, you get a prize,
Yay.
meaning you don't trip and fall.
I was gonna say, I'm conscious during the board meeting.
Nope.
Okay.
And feel free to jump in if I've missed anything when we get to that point.
Yep.
Mr. Scott,
I live to correct you.
what was that?
I live to correct
I know you do. All right, so rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock.
you.
Lizard beats what? Lizard sits on rock
Just always did rock, paper, scissors.
and
I
then,
know,
and then Spock eats
Got a
lizard.
fancy way of doing it.
I don't remember what it is.
There
I could ask friends, they would tell me in a second.
you go.
Bless you.
Thank you. All right, are we ready?
Buddy.
All right, well, it's 6:43 and we're back. So, on to our agenda. Thank you for the patience again for the executive session. We're just gonna run down our agenda to see if we can scoot any items in before we have CMRPC come at 7 o'clock and then our additional hearings and appointments and presentations, minutes. Minutes, who's got minutes?
Not us.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Sorry.
It's fine. So we will move last week's minutes and this week's minutes to next session, which is the 17th.
Mhm.
There any general public comment in the back? Just checking?
Nope,
No,
we're
all
good.
right, we're good. Kristen, do you want to go with your
TA report.
TA report?
Sure. Most of it is on the budget. So I will skip the first part of it if we can come back to it when
Yep.
we do the budget.
Mhm.
Let's see. A lot of it's on the budget,
I was
actually.
gonna say, I thought all 3 pages were on the budget. with
Yeah,
2 little bullet points at the end that weren't.
yeah, that's basically what I've done. So, it is an overview. Do you want me to give it now?
Sure.
It's not a bad thing to have.
What, the budget?
Oh, my town administrator report talks about the budget at a high level overview.
No, skip that. We'll bring that up. Go down to your.
My 2 little points at the bottom.
Your two,
Yes.
yeah, halfway through page 3. Come on
All
in,
right.
have a seat.
We're just pounding through a few other things until we get to your hearing.
Okay.
Okay, so budget website, we do have a budget webpage. If, for those of you who are not aware, it's accessible right off the homepage, townofberlin.com. There's a little button in the middle for the FY26 budget. I have redesigned the page and uploaded the most recent documents there for the town and school budgets. And hopefully folks will find it informative. I have not had a chance to do the graphs and the charts yet, but I think that's a great idea. I actually had a resident reach out with some graphs and charts and some suggestions, which was very helpful as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to continue to be working on that now that I'm close to being final on the budget. And the reason I say close is because tomorrow night,
Mhm.
March 11th, the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District will vote their budget. And then we will be able to have all of the numbers we need. But they did put their presentation out on Friday for
Mhm.
Tuesday. That does not mean the school committee will vote that budget that the administration is presenting, much like the FinCom may not, or the select board may not vote my budget. But I did use those numbers in the budget that you'll see tonight. Public safety renovation project is going strong. Carpentry and electrical work continue. And last week they started kicking off the plumbing work. They met with the plumbing inspector last week and we are still working on the HVAC. Unfortunately, National Grid took a look at what we had and they're really only able to provide technical assistance and assistance with rebates. So we've gone back to the architect to have the mechanical engineer he works with redesign that system to be more cost effective and allow the school to do the work. Because the system as designed is about a $300,000 to $400,000 system, which we can't afford, and it has a lot of ductwork that the school can't do. So we do have a meeting we're working to schedule either this week or next week to work on the HVAC components of the project. But I can tell you it's great to see the students in here. You know, there's definitely a vibrancy to the building and they seem to be enjoying it as well. They've done a really fantastic job. Also finalized insurance numbers for health and dental. Kathy Murphy, the treasurer collector, and I met with our insurance rep from Maya. Our health insurance increase is 12.1% and dental is 7.05%. Also, we had a great meeting of the regional dispatch district. We met at the dispatch center because of the 8 now towns. We had 3 new town administrators join us from Lunenburg, Lancaster, and Hudson. Lancaster is an interim. We also discussed Marlboro's request to join the district. There were concerns expressed by a number of the towns about moving the dispatch center to Marlboro. They have a piece of land they are going to be building a public safety fire dispatch complex on, and that is a deal breaker for them. Sort of, if you read the tea leaves in the room, the will of the other town administrators was to keep it in a bit northern kind of Route 2 area if Devens doesn't end up working out. They've outgrown their space at Devens and the fire services is moving in next door and they've been under construction for a year with all kinds of issues, including power outages and having to go on backup generators. And so that doesn't sound like it's necessarily going to go through. There was also concerns about how do you split up assessments because right now it's split evenly between every town and every town gets one vote in the same. And how do you do that when you have, you're bringing in somebody that's twice as large as the biggest town that we have right now, which would be either Lunenburg or Hudson at 20,000 because Marlboro's at 40,000 with a higher volume of call. So discussions still happening, but like I said, if I read the room, there isn't a lot of interest in moving forward. I think it would be a great move for both Berlin and in some ways for the district, but I understand the concerns that the other towns have expressed. And that's it.
Yeah, and we'll do all the budget when we get down there. We'll bring it back in.
Okay.
All right, so the next step was to talk about the February 28th Honto parking needs meeting. I went in person, Kristen was on video. So I don't know if you want to talk about the part on the video and then I'll talk about the walkabout that we had.
Sure. So it was a great meeting with state representatives. DCR was there. They've got parking issues, I believe, both with the current class and upcoming classes because of the elementary school sizes that are coming in.
Correct. They're forecasting about the need for approximately 100 new spaces.
Right. And they've got concerns. There's wetlands there. There was discussion about maybe they built a parking garage across the street, which that has its own set of issues, including long-term maintenance. And I don't know that that aesthetically is necessarily what you want to put down over there, plus wetlands, et cetera. But they would need a sign off from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. So this was just the initial set of conversations being had to take a look at the site and see what the next steps forward would be with the state.
So then we took a walkabout outside, and truly the only place where it can go, if you're driving to Tohoto and you're going down Route 70 to Boylston, you pass the high school, there's the parking lot, and then there's the lawn right there. That's where they would need to put it. Now, whether it's they put the 100 spaces this way or put the 100 spaces that way, they don't know. There's trees there, there's a memorial garden there. Either way you go, you're gonna have to regrade the land. They talked about putting gravel there. That brings its own set of concerns of what happens when you plow, what happens when it needs to be redone. Talked about ADA spaces. What would happen more than likely, all the spaces up the front of the school would turn into ADA spaces to equate the new spaces that you're putting in. A lot of moving parts. DCR is working with, I'm not quite sure who, because they only want one point of contact, so I'm thinking that's probably Al, to the interim superintendent, to be the go-between of what's it gonna look like. There was no discussion of costs. There was no discussion of time. I tried to press a time, like if they wanted to have it done for next school year, and it was, oh, we need to work the process. So maybe next year, maybe halfway through next year, maybe 2 years from now, don't know. But there was a lot of representation there, so that's what they are thinking, and the parking needs come from majority are kids who do sports. So you can't take the bus home and then try to find a way back to the school. So those kids are pressing to, it's great that they all play sports. They need a place to park. As Kristen talked about, they were thinking about, and again, I don't know if it was just a wild idea, a parking garage across the street, but then that brings its own set of things. That's Tower Hill property there. There's a farm there. Gigi Stowe has her farm there. They talked about building maybe a garage in one of the back parking lots up. So I don't know how they're going to go, but it seems that they're leaning towards gravel, flatten the lawn, make kids park there. But then they also have to figure out how are the kids going to get onto Route 70, which I'm assuming DOT will need to get in the chat as well.
And that's not a quick process,
No.
particularly with DOT.
No,
So-
but it's been brought up, and DCR seems willing to work with the towns on it, but lots to do on that. All right. I'll keep you posted, if there's anything else. Now, we have some guests in the back. Do we want to bring them up so that they don't have to stay for our entire meeting? I'm assuming, I don't know if,
I think everyone's for the 7 o'clock presentation.
all right. Oh, did you want to say anything special?
Sorry, behind.
Fire Mike?
Me?
Yeah,
About,
person sitting to your right.
oh, yes, well, yeah, so,
You gotta come forward.
Come on.
So we're gonna pivot for just a minute, and scoot around while we have, Fire Mike and an esteemed guest in the back of the room.
Yes, so I have one of my firefighters that unfortunately has to retire as of tomorrow because they've reached the mandatory age of retirement per the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Frank Brewer has been with us for 42 years. He was appointed as a call firefighter, has filled many roles in his career, and assisted us, throughout the entire time that he's been here. He's been a valued member of the department. From a driver operator to an interior firefighter, he's been very involved at the school and the fire prevention program down there during Fire Prevention Week. It's kind of a sad day to lose him in that capacity, but I'm happy to report that he's still going to stay within the department doing some maintenance for us, doing training programs for my new recruits that come in as a driver operator. I'm just waiting. I'm hoping that the ruling from the attorney will be that he can still operate in that role with us on the apparatus and stuff. But obviously, he's a world of knowledge for us, has all kinds of skills that he has at the station to be able to fix things from his engineering mind. It's very interesting to watch him work. He does a great job. So I'm just recognizing him as tomorrow will be his last day in the official capacity as a call firefighter with us.
Nice. And I would like to add on to that, besides what he does for the town, Frank has been my go-to guy on some small equipment needs when I couldn't get things done, and his name was passed in secret to me, so, but he was kind enough to come up multiple times, so, you know, Frank, thank you for my stuff, and thank you for everything that you did for the town, and will do for the town.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Fire Mike,
You're welcome.
and thank you, Frank,
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Frank.
All right, we got 5 minutes to spend, is there any?
Didn't realize the mandatory retirement age was 40. I just thought that was.
Mhm.
That's good.
All right, I don't know if there's anything that we can, unless we want to do,
New business.
do we want to do, yeah, do we want to do new business in 4 minutes or less?
I think we do new business in 4 minutes or less. That will force us to be succinct on new business.
All right, we can do that. And if I run long, Scott has my permission just to put his
Yep.
hand over my mic. So thank you to the town for their patience. We know that there's been 3 times that we've sat down to meet with you and 3 times that we've had to skip out into executive session to talk about negotiating Kristen's contract. Through that time, we spent a lot of time looking at surrounding towns, what they were paying. We were looking at towns similar to population. A Berlin town similar to EQV, Capita, similar to other financial ideas for that. So we were doing our best to make sure that we had done our due diligence for that. Scott and I just met with Kristen, and so what we have all agreed on is that we will right-size Kristen's contract in her first, well, actually her first year of her first contract. Dear God,
Fourth year, which is the first year of her new contract.
this is why it's peg math, kids,
Yeah.
so get on board. All right, so for her new contract, we have agreed to a salary of $160,000. What we also have agreed on is that years 2 and 3, Kristen will be tied to whatever other employees get for their COLA. So if it's a 2%, Kristen gets a 2%. If it's a 1%, Kristen gets a 1%. We have also agreed on maintaining her current vacation at 4 weeks, and we have revised the clause to say that if we terminate Kristen, that we will pay her 4 months of salary, which is very much in line with what other towns are getting. And actually, some other towns are getting 6 to 9 months. So, you know, we know that this is a learning position. You know, we were very fortunate with Margaret, our first year around. Kristen has had gigantic shoes to step in. She has stepped into them and continues to step in and step up. We took a look at her goals. She was able to meet all the goals with the exception of ones outside, like the building of the bunkhouse, some stuff with recreation, the pavilion, so things outside her control with that. So we appreciate you. We're glad that you want to stay with us. There's certainly not a lack of work to be done in this town, as you have seen. And that was part of it too, Kristen, is that we know if we were to say, then we'd be right back to where we are of new position, new person, maybe not a lot of experience, turnover in the town, lack of moving information from one person to another, impact to the public. So that is really what has gone into our decision. How did I do? Did I miss anything?
I think you did good. I mean, I as Peg said, it took us a while because we see the numbers on the budget. We think every penny is difficult to come by. But we also look at what towns around us have just recently hired town administrators that don't even have as much experience as Kristen has at dollar amounts higher. I think we came to a good agreement that I think will keep her here, keeps some of the salary structure in town in line. And I really appreciate your willingness to make sort of years 2 and 3 equal to the COLA that we give anyone else in town. And so going into the future years of the contract,
Mhm.
her percent raise will equal that happens to sort of any other non-union person in town. And so I would like to make the motion that we offer Kristen a new 3-year contract with the first year at 160, the second year's 2 and 3 at the COLA of the rest of the town, the same 4 weeks vacation she has, and increasing the severance to 4 months if we end up terminating, with the idea being that there's still some how do I say, if there's some irrelevant word choicing that has to make it all work, because we've not wordsmithed this to death yet. It still has to see the lawyer.
Mhm.
But that I am fine with things that are non-material changes to the contract. That was the word I was looking for.
Right.
Non-material change to the contract.
All right, I will second it. All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
congratulations.
You're stuck with us.
Thank
You're
you.
stuck with us.
May I say something quickly? I know it's 7, so I'll make it
Good.
really quick. I just wanted to say thank you to the board and everyone in the town. Everyone has been incredibly welcoming. I can't believe I'm about to enter year 4. I don't know where the time has gone. But this is an extremely busy, small community, and I love it. I didn't want to go to someplace that was Sleepy Hollow. I wanted to come in and work, and you guys have definitely kept me working. And I like that. I've learned a lot, and I've really just enjoyed everybody that I've worked with. So thank you to everybody, and thank you for your continued support.
Yeah. We're glad you're here.
And then now we've done that, we could start talking about all the things that could go wrong and hazard mitigation.
Absolutely.
So if we could have hey, can we get this up?
I sure can.
Our guest
Yeah,
tonight
if
to
you wanna
talk to
tell
us,
us to the
come on
front.
down to the front.
Nice.
Where's Tim Wheeler? Tim Wheeler, I ran into a gentleman this afternoon that had tons of accolades for you and about you and said that he had wished he had figured out a way to find more people like you. So
Oh.
thank you for all that you do.
Yep.
He's looking around like, who, what, me?
It's you, Jen. Oh, I don't think so.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. We'll get that presentation up on the screen so
Yeah,
folks
it's getting
can.
up to the screen over there.
Is it on?
That is turning on. It's HDMI 2, it just says.
And then I just need to share from Zoom.
So while we're getting that up, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then we can get going.
Okay.
Thank you for attending today's meeting and for being here. My name is Taru. I'm a resiliency planner with Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, and I'll let Will introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Will Talbot. I'm also a resiliency planner with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission.
All right. So I think you'll see the slides up here too. So we just want to go through them,
Trying to make it bigger.
you know, talk to us, highlights, like why we're here, why you guys are here, what we need to do. We have an assorted selection of people in the audience from our fire, police, Board of Health, Conservation is also here. CMR, CPA is here too as well, among other things that Mr. Wheeler does. So we are at your disposal.
Thank you all for being here. We will be giving an overview of the Berlin Hazard Mitigation Plan. And we'll be talking about the planning process and some of the major contents of the plan. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Moving. There we go.
So municipalities generally adopt hazard mitigation plans or HMPs to plan strategies to mitigate disasters. Since acting before disasters can save lives and money, this plan is for mitigating projected future natural hazards. It's about what Berlin can do now and in the future to reduce risks from natural hazards. Also, municipalities with adopt and update a hazard mitigation plan are eligible for FEMA mitigation grants under the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. It will help the town to make good use of its resources and apply for additional resources. Berlin's last HMT update was approved in April 2018. It expired in April 2023 and is due for an update. Can we go for the next slide? Thanks. So, as we discussed in the last slide, this is not an emergency response plan. Natural hazards covered by this plan include flooding, severe snowstorms, ice storms, nor'easters, hurricanes, severe thunderstorms, wind, tornadoes, wildfires, brush fires, earthquakes, dam failure, drought, extreme temperatures, invasive species, and other hazards like landslides, groundwater intrusion, etc. Next slide. So what is hazard mitigation? A hazard mitigation is permanently reducing or preventing losses of life, injuries, and property damage by using long-term strategies. In this hazard mitigation planning process, we ask, what preventive actions are being taken now to reduce future risks and damages? What additional actions can be taken in the future? Next slide, please. This graphic from the National Institute of Building Sciences, from a report titled Natural Hazard Mitigation Saves, exemplifies the usefulness of the hazard mitigation process. We see that between $3 and $7 is saved for each dollar spent on mitigation activities related to a variety of natural hazards. Next slide, please. So the goal of mitigation is to break the cycle of risk. Proactive hazard mitigation planning and the proactive implementation of hazard mitigation measures can help break the cycle of disaster and then reactive response and recovery. Acting to mitigate anticipated risks before disaster occurs can save lives and can help communities become more resilient. Next slide, please. So here are the 4 techniques for hazard mitigation: structure and infrastructure projects, preparedness and coordination and response actions, education and awareness programs, local plans and regulations. We will go through each of them in detail. Next slide, please. HMPs suggest structure and infrastructure projects like preventing floodwaters from reaching properties, building structures to control water flows, maintaining, repairing, and replacing culverts, dams, storm drainage facilities, and pumping facilities, to prevent and mitigate harmful effects of hazard events. They foster preparedness, coordination, and response actions like National Flood Insurance Program compliance, evacuation planning, community rating system adoption, facilitating and coordinating municipal administration, enforcement and collaboration to build strategic insight, resilience, and action planning. They propose education and awareness programs like natural hazard awareness websites, providing information about natural hazards at libraries, schools, and public buildings, mailing informational brochures to residents, and public outreach at community events to enhance community awareness and resilience. Mitigation measures can be incorporated into local plans and regulations like planning and zoning measures, subdivision and site plans, floodplain regulation, wetland bylaws, stormwater regulations, the state building code, master plans, and municipal vulnerability preparedness plans, and efforts for greater effectiveness. To do this plan, we formed a local committee. We want to thank all of your hardworking town officials and staff people who worked with us. Their time and effort and local knowledge were invaluable. The process for a hazard mitigation plan follows the following steps. CMRPC provides technical assistance to the town for plan development. The town coordinates through its local hazard mitigation team. Public survey, which was open from October 16 to November 15, 2024. Public presentation, which we're doing now, and is typically held during plan development and review of the draft plan. Submittal of the draft plan to MEMA sometime this spring, and then to FEMA tentatively this summer for review, revision, and approval, and then plan adoption by the select board tentatively during the fall. CMRPC assisted the Berlin local hazard mitigation planning team to identify and map critical facilities, identify and map locally identified hazard areas, identify and review existing mitigation measures, identify and prioritize new mitigation strategies, and gather feedback and input from public. Critical infrastructure sites identified by the HMP planning team in town and CMRPC include emergency response facilities like emergency operations centers, police station, fire department facilities, communications facilities, highway department facilities, emergency shelters, primary evacuation routes, railroad crossings, and hospitals and clinics. We also identified water supply and sewer facilities, town facilities, utilities, and hazardous waste sites, dams, and facilities and populations to protect, like apartment complexes, large housing developments, housing for seniors and or people with disabilities, public buildings and areas, schools, daycares, hotels, business centers, and historic buildings and sites. We also mapped critical infrastructure to see where it lies in relationship to hazards. See the vulnerable critical infrastructure and facilities map at the end of this presentation for details and questions. Any? So we also identified state and federal data on floodplains, snowfall, wind speeds, hurricanes, earthquake risks, etc. Reviewed Massachusetts State Hazard Mitigation Plan and coordinated with the local team to get local information on hazard areas and potential future developments. So next slide, please. So in this slide, for instance, we see some examples of data we use to inform hazard section of the plan. This has the earthquake data from Western Observatory at Boston College and hurricane, flooding and snow disaster data from FEMA. You can see the DR 4780 MA was the flooding event that caused significant damage in Leominster in September 2023. I'll let Will take over now.
Thank you, Taru. So the local HMP team in town, as well as CMRPC, identified many hazard areas in addition to high slope areas the state has identified and the FEMA flood zones that were like these additional areas have been locally identified by the team in town. And this is a select group of them. It isn't exhaustive, but it's some of them that we want to highlight during the presentation. The first is flooding, locally identified flooding risk area identified at the intersection of River Road West, South Street, and Whitney Road. This includes the Rockwell Apartments and the Homewood Suites by Hilton Boston Marlborough Hotel. And much of this area is in the 100-year flood zone. For wildfires, we identified Mount Pisgah, which experienced a major wildfire in April 2023, which the Berlin Fire Department and the Northborough Fire Department jointly responded to. This area recently burned, so the fuels, haven't had time to build up, so the risk is lower at this point, but eventually could become higher in the future once the fuels build up again. Also for wildfire areas, we identified the area near the Lester G. Ross Dam, as well as the Randall Road and River Road West solar farms. And then the local HMP team in town identified several invasive species hazard areas along roadways. This includes, some of them include Boylston Road, West Street, and Lyman Road. So the public survey that the HMP team and CMRPC conducted was open from mid-October through mid-November 2024, as Taru said, and we received 59 total responses. The hazards that respondents had the greatest concern regarding were winter storms and ice, thunderstorms, microbursts, and extreme wind, flooding, and drought. The survey results inspired several new mitigation strategies that were included in the draft plan. The survey was promoted through the town website, the town Facebook page, and the Powderhouse News digital newsletter. As well, survey flyers, paper surveys, and drop boxes were available at the public library, municipal offices, general store, 19 Carter Community Center, and transfer station, as well as the Northbrook Village, Meadowbrook Village, and Rockwell Apartments housing developments. And this was so that people who either preferred to take a paper survey or who didn't have access to the internet were able to take the survey. So the town is already doing a lot of different things to mitigate the risk of natural hazards in town. These are the existing mitigation measures we identified in the plan. Several of these are multi-hazard mitigation measures. These include the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan for the town, compliance with the state building code, education and outreach efforts, the Code Red hazard warning system and notifications, which the HMP team noted as being very effective in town, as well as plans, regulations, and studies. For flood-related hazard mitigation efforts the town's already working on. This includes National Flood Insurance Program compliance, street sweeping and catch basin cleaning, roadway treatments, drainage preventative practices to reduce clogging, subdivision rules and regulations, as well as zoning regulations. For dam failure mitigation measures, these include compliance with Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, dam safety regulations, as well as dam monitoring. Then for wind-related hazards, this includes the tree trimming program in town, which the HMP team in town has also noted has become very effective in recent years. For winter-related hazards, mitigation measures in town include the salting and sanding of roads and plowing and snow removal. And then for wildfire, brush fire-related hazards, this is the town releasing permits for outdoor burning to mitigate wildfire hazards. So when looking at the critical infrastructure, the hazards, and the existing mitigation measures identified in the plan, the HMP team in town and CMRP staff asked several questions. Where are the gaps in what the town is doing right now? What actions will further reduce vulnerability? And then where are the priorities in town? What are the things that the town really would like to work on to reduce the potential impact for natural hazards? And so just giving some examples of some of the mitigation measures we came up with. This is not an exhaustive list of the high priority mitigation measures. We have several other high priority ones, as well as many others that we had as medium or lower priority. And for the examples, we have one for each type of mitigation strategy. So for structure and infrastructure, one of them that we came up with was improving the town's emergency management personnel's access to the Mount Pisgah Conservation Area, including the middle field, so that they can respond in the instance of emergency. For preparedness, coordination, and response, the HMP team in town expressed an interest in joining a regional emergency planning committee. For education and awareness, the HMP team discussed and we added a mitigation strategy for conducting public education on drought mitigation, and especially as this relates to private wells. The town relies on private well water and does not have a municipal water system. So that makes drought mitigation for private wells especially important in town. And for a local planning related strategy, the example we have here is implementing a tree and forest management plan at Ball Hill Road. And then after this is implemented, working and expanding these type of efforts to other parts of town, both for planning and implementation in other forested areas. So next steps for plan approval and adoption. Once the plan is finalized, we have the public comment period. We address any concerns brought up tonight. And we have that public comment period. We will send it in to MEMA, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, and they will review the plan. Then the Federal Emergency Management Agency will be forwarded the plan from MEMA and will review the plan and is the agency that would issue conditional approval. And then once conditional approval is received, a select board resolution to adopt the plan can occur. And CMRPC can attend this meeting to talk about the plan if the town wishes. The select board meeting for the plan approval. FEMA is the agency that issues final plan approval. And then the plan is in effect for 5 years. So CMRPC has several recommendations for implementing the plan. The first is that the town may establish a local implementation group whose first task will be to prepare a timeline for implementation. The town should also work to integrate the plan's recommendations with other local plans and policies, such as the town's master plan, updates to the town's zoning bylaw, the town's open space and recreation plan, and any municipal vulnerability preparedness program efforts in town. What this plan makes the town eligible for, as discussed earlier by Taru, is FEMA, a certain amount of FEMA pre-disaster and post-fire grants. But the plan can also be used to support applications for other funding sources for plan mitigation measures. And these other funding sources can include state and local funds, as well as other federal non-FEMA funds. It is recommended the town, the HMP team in town meet at least yearly to review progress on plan implementation. And the town should plan for updating the plan in 5 years from now so it can remain eligible for FEMA grant funding and there won't be like a gap. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight for this presentation. We just want to let you know that the full draft plan will be available on the Berlin Town website within several weeks. And once it's on the town website, you all can post any comments or questions about the plan, or send any comments or questions about the plan to myself. My email is wtalbot@cmrpc.org, and we'll put my email on the post on the website, and it'll be open for 2 weeks. So feel free to provide any comments you have, and we will work with the HMP team in town to see how we can integrate those into the plan. And also on the next 3 slides are the maps that we've prepared for the plan. So if you all have any questions, we can reference the maps. And then also, thank you all for being here. Would you all mind signing this? So this is for the FEMA documentation of who was here at the presentation.
Do you need this just for us, or do you need?
I think the audience has already
Yeah,
signed, so
it-
just
it was
for.
passed around the
board
audience for a bit. I would have grabbed it, but I have hazards all around me. Yeah.
people. No worries. So
Right.
thanks, everyone. If you all have any questions, feel free to ask, but that's all we have.
So I'll open it briefly to the floor. Do you have any questions that you want to go?
I was just, that there are probably invasive species on every acre of town somewhere. And trying to figure out some efforts to that. But for me, it's the tougher nut to crack for us as a town will be that access for emergency service to conservation areas, because those same paths that would allow our fire and police departments to get into the woods can also be used by vehicles that can harm our natural environment out there as well, and trying to find where that balance is. And I think that's been an impasse for a while, and I don't know how we at some point bring the folks together to see where there could be a way to preserve the environment so we don't have ATVs and 4-wheelers ripping everything up out there. Because that's even a spot in places where we don't have, the fire department still can't get through, and there's still ATV problems out there, but still have this place. So when we have a heart attack in the woods or a lost hiker, that we can get someone out faster than we're able to now.
Kristen, any questions?
No, I sat on the team and thank you very much
Yeah.
to everyone else who served from the town and to CMRPC for putting everything together for us.
Yes, it's good.
So we have about 6 minutes, and I'm going to limit questions, so you'll need to come up to the mic, state your name, be as brief as possible, because I'll cut you off if you babble.
We have to come up to the.
Paul McKelk,
Mm,
Carter Street. Can you hear
You
me?
gotta come up to
Well,
a
we can
mic.
hear you, but it has to be on the mic so
Oh,
people on the.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you, sir.
What does drought mitigation of private wells, what does that mean? Being on the Board of Health, that's one of the things that was hung out there. I have 2 things. That's a question. The second one was where they recommend meeting once annually. Once annually, by the time you get around to the second year, nobody's going to remember what happened the first year. I don't think that sequence is appropriate for something of this nature.
Those questions that you can answer now, or do you want to take them back and stew on them and come
I can
back?
definitely take the second one now.
Okay,
So yes, for the meeting once annually, that recommendation is kind of a minimum because we know a lot of towns have limited capacity. CMRPC is currently working on a project through the district local technical assistance program with towns that have approved by FEMA HMPs, and essentially, we're hoping to use some of that funding every year for towns with active HMPs to help coordinate meetings, and those meetings could take place more than once a year. It's kind of the goal if the town opts to participate in that. And then in terms of drought mitigation, do you have?
It will take some planning, to look at, definitely look at groundwater, look at the effect in town, the heat temperature. We're doing a regional heat resiliency plan. It's a lot of research to get to it, but, some of the strategies could include looking at groundwater particularly, and then looking at what are the ways we can do rainwater harvesting, and create strategies to replenish the groundwater.
So Paul, I would encourage you, and I'm gonna cut you off because there's other people there, so I would encourage you to take your questions and write them.
Fine.
Yep.
So we're good. Chief, were you standing up in the back?
I was just going to speak specifically to the drought mitigation plan that we had mentioned in there. That's more of a public education program for us to speak to people that, meaning the residents that currently were in a drought. We're coming out of the winter months without snowpack, but to be able to explain to them that conserving that water not only saves their well, but their neighbors' wells as well. Too many wells. But just trying to get that education component out there and stuff as we go through the drought situations and stuff, because refilling people's wells, we do get the calls at the fire department, can you refill our well? And the answer is no, because when we put the water in, it's just going to disperse out of their well into the groundwater and stuff, and it won't actually stay there. So it's those type of things of just getting the education out. We came up with that as a mitigation strategy just to start educating the town. So.
Are there any other questions? Looking at you. Looking at the person behind you. Nothing? Okay, Mr. Brookings, anything? All right. We good? Look at that, right on time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
We
both
appreciate
very
being
much.
here.
Yep.
We'll definitely be in touch. And Kristen, will this presentation will be, yeah, stop, Scott. Will this presentation be available online for town folks?
Yep, we can put it online.
All right, so next up, if you walk slowly to the front, slowly. We have a couple members from our Conservation Commission. You all have to introduce yourselves. You talk about the Rail Trail Grant update. Thank you for coming and welcome. And get the invasive species off my street.
Right, well, so I was gonna comment and say that the Conservation Commission would be happy to work with probably the Highway Department on some strategies to at least reduce invasives.
Or at least identify them.
Yeah,
You know, so that
identify,
people know, oh, pretty flower is bad flower.
right,
Okay.
right.
All right, so ladies are up. Thank you for stalling for as long as possible.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So I'm Robin Berry.
Carolyn McDonald.
Yep. So this is a follow-up to the last time we were here, which I believe was in January of 2024. So just to recap, at that time, we had come asking for some funds to do a match for the Mass Trails grant. So we, ultimately requested $150,000 through the Mass Trails grant. You guys gave us 40,000 with the understanding that 30,000 would be that match. And so we did get that grant. We've gone through the first half of that. So the agreement at that time was that we would do a feasibility study, a more detailed feasibility study than what was done at the state level back in 2021. So we did that with VHB, and we had a public meeting on that last week. So we got some feedback on that. I would say we probably had about 50 to 60 people there. It was pretty evenly mix of, supporters, people with concerns, et cetera, et cetera. So overall, it was a good meeting. There were a couple of concerns raised, but for the most part, no real surprises. The east side section from the town line to Coburn Road is a pretty straight shot. No surprises there. And then west of Coburn Road, there's still a lot up in the air in terms of like what our options are. So they presented a few different things that could potentially be options for the west side, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. So the plan as part of the Mass Trails grant was that we were going to focus on, the doing the feasibility study for the overall trail, but then the second part of that would be focusing on some early design work for that east side section up to Coburn Road. And so that's what we're here for tonight, is just to kind of go over the status of where we are and just make sure that the select board is still okay with us moving forward with the second portion of the what we've asked for funds for the Mass Trails Grant, which would be to do sort of preliminary design. They would do, VHB would do a flyover survey probably in April or May to get more detailed information so that they could move forward with, you know, understanding some of those areas on that section east of Coburn Road where, you know, there might be some low-lying areas where there's water. It's just to get a better understanding of things. So that's where we're at this point. We'd like to just get the select board's approval on that to continue with this next step of having VHB do that survey and some additional deep dive on phase one, which is that section from the town line to Coburn Road.
So you have the 150 was the grant,
Yes.
and then we gave you.
Sorry, the 120 was the grant and 30 was the match funds. And the select board at the time had allocated $40,000 of the earmarked funds for us to use. So I think there's still $60,000 that's unallocated, which is another question I had in terms of thinking forward to the next grant, if that's something that we could ask for to potentially continue on with design work for the next grant cycle, which would be this fall.
And so in some respects, you're looking to sort of get phase one going, which is town line with Hudson to Coburn Road.
Yes.
And sort of keep focusing on that and get that going while we figure out, or while you figure out the couple of little hiccups that are potentially from there to the Clinton line.
So we probably wouldn't focus too much on the west side section.
Right, that's right, yeah.
In the short term. I mean, the feasibility study was kind of just to get lay of the land and whatnot. But in terms of like next steps, we would really focus on just that east side portion, because that's really where the state is probably ready. They're ready to jump on that because Hudson's already moving forward. The Eversource project through Sudbury is, I think, nearing completion. So there's a lot of movement there. And actually, there was talk that they might actually build that section in Berlin before the other section in Hudson, just because Hudson needs a couple of bridges. That's going to be a lot more expensive. So the state is really ready to move forward with this section in Berlin. So we would primarily focus on that without really doing too much of a deep dive on the second phase.
And I think one of the things we learned really, not only that Clinton's moving at a decent rate as well,
Yeah.
but that as this trail from Boston to, where's the terminus? It's out past Springfield somewhere.
Yeah,
but that-
Northampton, I think. maybe
That
further.
as each section gets built, there is both more pressure and sometimes more funding
Yeah,
to help with the remaining sections. And so by having some of our phase one sort of done, it potentially puts us in a better spot to get funding for that
exactly.
western section, which will be a little bit messier, more
Yep.
costly, but potentially more state funding or other funding to help us put it together.
Yeah, so I think in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of funding changes on this. So like Mass Trails, I think was established in like 2018. So there's all that grant funding there. Some of that grant funding is actually being allocated towards like trail maintenance and things like that, because that's always been a big point of contention with, you know, residents and whatnot and abutters. So there's also funding at the state level, the TIP funding to do actual construction work. So a lot of the funding that's there now didn't exist even a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of options there now where we could potentially get this done without it costing anything to the town.
So, well, okay, that's three questions. So first question I have, you talk about Berlin connecting to Hudson, but Berlin doesn't connect to Hudson. You have like this much for Berlin. So what's going on with this little teeny tiny
Hudson's
space?
taking
Because if they're not gonna
effort.
do anything, it's
Yeah.
kind of silly for here and here, because then you take your car and you drive into Berlin and continue the trail.
Yeah, so DCR committed to doing that piece of Bolton. So Bolton's not going to be involved at all, but DCR did commit to doing that piece. So I don't know if it would be done as part of the Berlin, you know, if they did Berlin first, I don't know that they would do that section or if they'd wait till Hudson, but at some point DCR is going to take care of that little section between Berlin and Hudson.
So you had said that there were about 50, 60 people at the meetings and kind of split.
Mhm.
Yay, no.
Yeah.
So for the no people, what were their feelings on you sharing with them that you wanted to go forth and these were your next steps? What were the not in my backyard conversations that they were coming up with?
So I guess to start, it's not really optional. The state's going to build it whether people want it or not. So there's that. The concerns that did come up though, some people, there was discussion about fencing, you know, some people want it, some people maybe don't. So the fencing conversation came up. There was a discussion about concerns about liability, like if a tree on your property fell onto the trail, who's responsible? So,
Vice versa?
oh, yeah, or vice versa. So there is that law in Mass that, you know, allows people to use private land for recreational purposes and whatnot, et cetera. But apparently, somebody at the meeting said that there was a case where a landowner was responsible for the damage or so I can't speak to that. I don't know, but that came up. And then one person was concerned about eminent domain was, you know, the town or the state going to take private land for purposes of the trail. So, because one of the proposed routes west of Coburn Road kind of goes up towards Randall Road through, I think it's the POTUS property where the solar farm is. So there's some private land in there that obviously would require some, you know, negotiations and whatnot. So, but, you know, the point was brought up, the state's not looking to take people's land. You know, this is meant to be a community project. So ideally, we would be able to find a route that would not require taking people's land. It would be under agreement, you know, of some sort. So I would say those were the big ones that came up that I documented that
So my third one, and I'm just gonna play devil's advocate and ask the person, that's what it is. You know, you had talked about that there's more funding available. Given the current state of the world, if all that funding drives up and there is no funding available, how do you propose coming back to the town and saying,
I would say until the state money ferry comes back with more earmarked funds, we would probably just shelve it. It's not worth, you know, arguing. I mean, I know Clinton is holding like bake sales and stuff to raise money. We're not doing that. I'm not doing that here, put it that way.
okay,
And then, Kristen, we had a tree fall even the last year on a town tree on town property and even caused some damage. There was no liability to the town for that, was there? Okay.
because it was an unseen force of nature.
Right.
Act of
Topple.
God, I think they
Yeah.
call it, like when it comes to trees.
Yeah, so that was a concern that was raised. So,
Mhm.
you know, obviously we can't speak to that, but
It is what it is. I mean.
yeah,
CMRPC, you know, giant windstorm.
exactly.
You know, drought, trees.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I saw some stuff, and I think, to be fair, I think the room was sort of a third people opposed, a third people supporting, and a third from people out of town. Because it was a
True,
serious number
yeah.
who were out of town.
True,
I think
yes.
town residents might have been sort of evenly split, but there was a serious
Yeah.
number of people from out of town who actually, some of them had some great interest in it and wanted to because they're looking forward to biking it, or they have it in their own towns. and-
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the thing, like Craig Della Penna, who's a big champion of the trip, he showed up. I can't remember the guy's name, a guy from Sudbury who's been very active in getting Bruce Freeman and Mass Central through there. We had the folks from Clinton came. Trying to think.
Tom Green, right?
No,
Isn't-
Tom
from Hudson?
He's from Hudson, but yeah, he didn't come to this. So we had a good fair amount of people from out of town though, yeah.
I mean, the other thing is those people out of town have done it in their towns, and so.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Speaking from experience, we can get some lessons learned from those folks to make sure we do something sort of better in town. And so we already have money sitting in a fund to move this closer to a design phase, to do the flyover and other pieces.
Yeah, that piece of it is covered with the grant that we already
and-
have.
Right, the grant we already have, and it expires at some point
It's
soon.
ARPA, so it
Right.
expires at the end of 26.
Right,
Okay, so we do have more time. So then we could use that for funding for the next one if we wanted to put in for this fall.
yeah.
Yeah, I just pulled up the contract because I wanted to make sure it's December 31st, 2026. And all it says is provided further that not less than $100,000 shall be expended for improvements to the rail trail and road. And we did do some emails back and forth with the state. I believe we asked that question already. I can go back and pull my emails, but it was a very general.
Mhm.
Right, we don't have a rail trail, so how can there be improvements? But we need to have a plan in order to have a rail trail, so we're
Right.
kind of sort of doing an improvement.
Right.
Correct. So it was really
Yep.
open as to what we could use that funding on. It just had to be used for the rail trail.
Okay.
And so the next step you'd like to do, how would you describe it so I can make? mine
So the next step, I
appropriate?
would say, is like preliminary design, like less than
Yeah.
10% design. It would be the survey work, that flyover, which they would do the full trail for that, just because if you're gonna have somebody come out and fly over, it just
Yeah.
makes sense to do all of it. And then some of that more detailed work for phase one up to Coburn Road, kind of figuring out some of those areas where we have issues, where there's, low-lying areas where there's water and things like that. So it'd be a deeper dive to kind of answer even more questions.
So before you make your motion,
That's fine.
on the flyover, can you figure out a time-ish, and can you get information out to the town? Otherwise, I have a feeling that Eric and Fire Mike are going to be loaded with, oh my God, there's a drone over my yard for the
Yeah.
past 20 minutes, and I'm gonna shoot it down unless somebody tells me not to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
I mean, Eric, from your point of view, and even Fire Mike, from your point of view, are there any issues with drones being flown around town for this?
Just got a voicemail on my phone tonight. So somebody reported a drone being flown above their house 3 days ago
Okay,
with a light bar on it.
A little hard to track down now.
all right,
Yes, the calls do come in.
Okay.
Sometimes we just do a little PSA on it.
okay.
Okay.
We get notification. Flyovers to look at stuff, so we can put it out, just to let people know they're gonna see aircraft in the area, so if we know, it's just a good thing to put out, just to say they are out, it is, we know about it, they are doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
So for those who didn't hear, Fire Mike and Eric, we'll do some more public service announcements to let people know that there'll be things flying over their house and it's okay. And don't call.
All right, and I'll see if I can get a firm date, or at least a date range on that.
Ish, and
Yeah.
then you can get it out, again, utilize the item, I don't know, Powderhouse Hill, if there's timing on that. Town website, your website, the unofficial Berlin websites. Maybe, item, just a general store poster, library poster, 19 Carta poster, just so that enough people know. Oh, because a couple years ago, when they were flying the helicopter over the aqueduct by my house, there was traffic lined up down Linden of what is this? So, yeah, and now we have the gender reveal, the blue and pink flags on the aqueduct, so. Yeah, the more that you can let people know, then we quell the fear.
Okay.
Okay, all right, go.
So I don't know the dollar amount, but I'm fine with moving on to sort of initial preliminary design stuff on phase one from Berlin Town Line to Coburn Road, using the existing grants and earmarks that we have for that, to move that along.
I will second that motion. All right, any other questions? All right, all in favor? Aye. Boom chakalaka. Thank you, ladies. Keep us posted.
Will
Yep.
do.
The back, the more information that you can get out there,
Yep.
the less.
Yeah.
We
Yep.
can cut off at the pass.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah,
You're more than
Thanks.
welcome.
just want to thank you for your support, and I want to thank Robin for all of her hard work on this.
Yeah,
I happened to be on vacation the night that this was planned.
And you didn't
The-
call in.
I didn't.
You didn't
I
Wi-Fi in.
didn't, no,
All right,
no.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, moving right along. Boom chakalaka. We are
Time.
almost on time tonight. All right. Next up for the next 15 minutes is the Board of Health discussion regarding the landfill transfer station and shared septic system / 1870 Town Hall. So Mr. Brookings and Paul, come on up. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Nice to see you. Bill, when we invited you, we didn't expect you to bring like 8,000 feet of paperwork.
I'm never seen without files, so I gotta keep my image,
All right. So you can introduce yourself for those who may not know you, why you're here.
Paul McKelk, Board of Health.
Bill Brookings, Board of Health Agent from the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health.
Welcome, gentlemen. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
We will start with the 1870 shared septic system topic. The town owns the 1870. They would like to do a lot more with it to generate revenue. There's been major improvements made. However, there is the septic in order to do that, a number of Board of Health regulations have to be dealt with. Currently, the septic system for the 1870 is a pipe that exits the building, goes to a tank of unknown size, which also just beyond the tank connects to a residential line from the property next door. So two lines then traverse Woodward Ave and go to a leach pit septic field that is on First Parish Church property. At this point, little is known about the tank size at 1870 or the size of the leach field. This situation was put into place several decades ago. A past attorney who has passed tried to resolve this in the early 2000s, and it did not happen. And for the town to move forward with use of 1870, the situation needs to be cleaned up. Everybody needs to know what's going on. Is it an adequate size leach pit? Is it an adequate size tank out of the 1870? I know the resident next door, they did upgrade their tank size, so I don't think there's an issue there. And this goes to a third-party location, namely property owned by First Parish Church. So it's really up to the town, from my perspective, to initiate some action to get this situation resolved, find out what's up and find out what usage can be made of the 1870.
Are you saying we can't use the 1870 town hall currently?
I didn't say that. If the town wants to use the 1870 more vigorously to generate income, and there are issues, we just can't allow all kinds of people in there not knowing what the septic situation is.
So is there an occupancy or number of events limitation we should be putting on it?
Probably. I could not answer that
We don't
myself.
have even enough information to say that because no one's determined the capacity of the existing system.
Right. If I remember correctly, when I was involved a little bit in it, looking into, is that it was about the 1950s or so it was put in. And so it's 70
That
or so
sounds
years
about right.
old.
Yep.
And so finding that information is,
Well,
The point is,
Not
investigation needs to happen to move anything forward on this.
yeah, I don't know if has the town talked to an engineer? There was a female engineer in my office randomly caught me in the hallway, didn't get her name, didn't get her company, reviewed all these files and said she was preparing a proposal for the town.
So this is the Complete Streets project. I had reached out to HSH, who's preparing the design for that project because the pipes do run under Woodward Ave. And as Paul brought to my attention, if we're going to do that project with bike lanes, paving, et cetera, we may want to determine how best to proceed so we don't have to rip anything out after we put it in. So I brought that to the attention of the engineers and I gave them a copy of the letter from the Board of Health. They were going to put together just a cost proposal of what it would cost to do some initial investigation into the system.
great.
And just to address, there was obviously quite a bit of work that went into the, I'll just call it the elevator project, but none of the design or engineering for that project affected the right side of the building where the issues of the septic line and septic tank are. I reviewed plans with our building commissioner and there was nothing there. So right now it's a blank slate in terms of, we don't know.
Well, I think we'll wait to hear what it costs to investigate it. We'll
Mhm.
take it as soon as it's in.
So are you saying that we should now limit events, not limit events? Is there any imminent danger that something's gonna blow in the
We
middle of
don't
town,
know because we don't know the size of anything.
then we'll.
You know,
I mean-
that's the bottom line. We don't know. So whatever usage we do, there's a certain risk factor. You know, as long as we're not piling 200 or 300 people in there, I know there are some wood turners meetings and things like that. You can probably limp along those lines without an issue popping up, but it could happen at any point because that leach pit has been in place for a long time. Nobody knows really much about it. There's little or no records.
Where does the church stand on this, since it's on their property? Have they said anything to you? Have they brought any concerns? I mean, I know obviously right now the church is shut down until structural issues are up, but I thought at one time there was, you know, that they were making food for the public and there was a concern with water, that they shouldn't be in there making food for the public, so.
As a sidebar, they do have an issue with water. My understanding is they've applied for a grant to bring water from the children's church to the main church. Because the main church water supply is not suitable for, cooking of meals. Which is another possible ding on Complete Streets because they're gonna have to dig up the street to get from the children's church to the main church. So First Parish has a couple things on their plate that they need to deal with.
But they haven't brought anything to your attention.
No.
We've met with them regarding the public water supply with DEP, and that's the direction they're headed, but that's really the last time we've spoken to them.
Okay. All right, so
So
we'll,
Chair, one question to Paul. One thing that I noticed in that letter and that we talked about was before any of those properties can be sold, that issue needs to be resolved. But I guess the question I had with regard to that is how does that impact say the residents were to be sold? How does that impact 1870 and First Parish, or does it? If one of them is to be sold, do they just have to come into compliance?
It's kind of a legal question. I mean, the
Okay.
fundamental question is you've got a pre-existing non-conforming shared systems. And
Okay.
shared systems were never defined by the code until 1995's revision. So anything previous to that is kind of a legal grandfather type question. You know, I think Attorney Burke's attempt was to get this cleaned up so that, you know, if this became a legal shared system with proper easements, documents, covenants, you know, the parties involved could sell, let's say, ownership could change, it's clean. If that hadn't been addressed and that house goes for sale, it's really gonna become, you know, a legal question as to whether or not someone buying it would feel comfortable with just the respect of that being pre-existing versus having something in the deed that protects it.
did you have a timeframe-ish when that could be back?
I know she was going, Katie, I believe her name was coming to look at the documents.
Okay.
I'll follow up with her and see where she's at.
Yeah, she met with me last, it was probably a Tuesday or Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear back from her, just
I'll let
pop
you
it
know.
on an agenda, so we'll get
Sure.
that. All right, so next up you had landfill, transfer station.
Okay, one last comment on 1870. Time goes by very quickly. 20+ years since Franny Burke tried to deal with it has gone by. I would encourage the board and town administrator to really pay attention to this, because otherwise we're gonna end up with a snarled rat's nest. If somebody passes away, there's a property involved. We've got 3 different property owners. And right now, from where I sit, the town is really kind of on the hot seat to create some movement with this.
No, it's moving.
I was gonna say, I thought we've done on Complete Streets, you
Yeah.
have a consultant in there getting us the price to investigate, so at least we have knowns.
Yep.
Something we've not had before.
Okay,
All right. Landfill, transfer station?
transfer station. In early December, DEP contacted the board and let us know that we need to do a third-party transfer station inspection and a third-party landfill inspection. We enlisted Ty and Bond Engineering to do the third-party transfer station inspection. They gave us a quote of $5,000. That inspection has been done, all the paperwork has been filed, and everything is in good state with the DEP. And myself and the board took it upon ourselves to take care of some of the paperwork. So instead of $5,000 to tie and bond, the total billing that we're on the hook for is $2,620. So we cut that bill almost in half by taking on some of the stuff ourselves. The landfill survey is going to be somewhat different. Again, we're going to use tie and bond. They have given us a quote, confirmed the contract with them earlier today. Their contract is for $6,000 to do the survey. Survey is, well, I don't want to bore you with the whole paragraph, so maybe I will just give you some information of what's involved. They're going to be looking at topography. They're going to, DEP is going to want to see monitoring wells, both water, methane. They're going to want to look at the tree line and any infiltration of that into the old landfill. The engineering fee, if it comes out to a full $6,000, is frankly chump change compared to what we're probably going to be facing. I did a little research in terms of, you know, monitoring wells. I contacted a firm called GeoSearch, who does this sort of work regularly. They've worked with Tie and Bond, they've worked with DEP. Just one machine to put on site is $2,200. This is all going to be dependent on what the Tie and Bond report says, what the DEP interpretation of that is. Their DEP is going to note any deviations from what their standard protocols are, and they will come back to us telling us what we need to do. There will be opportunity for some give and take conversation with them. I think primarily because our old landfill is fairly innocuous. We haven't used it since 1983. It was always just kind of a rural residential landfill, not a lot of probably any industry, unless it was snuck in under the cover of darkness. So it's kind of vanilla, and it's also small. It's probably in the 2 to 3 acre. But there's kind of a, well, I don't know if it's a new guard at the DEP, but there's a new impetus in looking at even small landfills. I know Princeton is going through the same thing, and the DEP wants to do a deep dive to see that these landfills are properly closed according to their protocols. So that's what we're facing. And it's really going to be an unknown. They're going to want monitoring wells that typically go down, they can go down 30 feet. Each well is probably $500. And that doesn't count the machine that drills the well. That's just to put the well in, the materials. Soil samples every 5 feet. There's just a lot that we're going to be potentially asked to investigate. And until this survey is done, until we hear back from DEP, we really don't know the guardrails, the parameters of it. So it's a question mark. On a good day, we might get away with $25,000 in terms of investigative work. That might be on the low side, and it could certainly be noticeably more. You know, those are frankly just guesstimates based on, you know, one of the machines can do 3 wells a day, $500 a well, plus the $2,200 for the machine, and, you know, tick, 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 it just keeps adding up. That is something I met with capital planning to give them a heads up back in January, I believe it was. And they suggested that they thought that they would put a placeholder on the warrant to cover the financial end of this. Now, the Board of Health currently has some monies, but until we have a firm handle on this, the monies, we're using the monies we have to pay off the transfer station inspection, the tie-in bond, the presumably $6,000, and that could increase depending on things, tie-in bond for the landfill inspection. And hopefully get started with some of the testing that DEP requires.
You won't by 2 weeks from now have an idea what this number is going to be, though.
I doubt it, no.
So it's probably something better for fall town meeting. Because you'll have a chance to not only get the $6,000.
As long as the DEP is acceptable to that timeframe. I mean, I've lobbied with them saying, you hit us in the middle of a fiscal year. And, you gotta be patient because we've got to circle our wagons and round up our money.
If they're doing it with a bunch of small towns, they have to understand that the towns just don't have checkbooks. They just write things on. There are processes that they.
You're singing in the choir.
And so they're more than, I think we've been showing progress. We've been following.
We have. I don't think there's no issue to this point.
Right.
I talked to the DEP late last week, told them that we were going to be moving forward with the landfill survey. I'm staying in touch with it, tie-in bond and the DEP. The worst thing that happens is silence, and then agencies get a little nervous. So I've been trying to maintain that track. So far, so good.
I did put a placeholder on fall town meeting because if it's, wells are construction, but I wasn't sure if it meets the definition of capital because it's more testing and monitoring. So I was thinking it would be a special article.
Yeah.
So I do have a placeholder for that on the warrant, should you have a better idea of the numbers between now and then.
And again, you said fall town meeting, not May town meeting.
I had it on May.
Oh, yeah, May.
I can move it.
Yeah.
I imagine, I'm imagining that the engineering survey will be done within the next 2 months and give them some time to do their report, which will go to DEP. There'll be a back and forth with DEP, the engineering firm, and ourselves. So that is likely to push us certainly beyond the May town meeting before we really know what we're going to be looking at. Other than whatever semi-incidental expenses occur between now and then, just to get the survey done and necessary paperwork.
So the survey should be done or needs to be done in the next 2 months. It's a big difference.
Haven't been given a drop dead date. We're just moving forward. I sent the contract to tie-in bond today. They responded, they received it. They'll be getting back in touch with me with a date to start the survey, their end of things. I'm going to guess within the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll be visiting our landfill.
For me, I'm not great with a warrant article for, we have the to fix landfill. We don't know exactly what it's for, its dollar amount. I think for a fall town meeting, we can work out whether or not it goes through capital, or just goes through select board. I don't think Board of Health cares what pool of money it comes from. I don't think DEP cares what pool of money it comes from as long as it gets done. And so we'll figure out, does it fall under capital if capital wants an opinion, or it just has to come from us.
I can,
I'm doing what I can to keep pushing this down the road because of the financial aspect.
So where would the 6,000 come from?
Right now, I think the Board of Health can cover it.
Right. I think we've already said in a previous meeting that if Board of Health runs out of money before the end of the year, that we would support a reserve fund transfer because these two things were in their planned budget. And so I stick to that I would support a reserve fund transfer if they somehow ran out of money because they had these unexpected $8,600 worth of expenses.
At our next
saving.
At our next meeting, I will have a better idea of where we are. The board is financially. They're going to crunch the numbers, but I believe unless something really unexpected comes up, that we should be able to cover the $6,000 amount for the survey. It's what happens after that that is problematic.
So do we need to say anything, vote on anything? We good? All right, gentlemen. Well, keep us posted. Come on back. Love to see you. We'll expect more paperwork next time, you know,
Yeah.
you show up. Mhm. Appreciate
But
you.
because he has that, he probably has, the 1950 design.
Oh, it's already.
Bill's been down in the belly of the building, you know, going through all the file cabinets and cardboard boxes to look for this stuff.
Never lose paper.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
Yep.
All right, so at 8 o'clock, we had the WRTA update on the new van service to Hudson and Marlboro.
Okay, and I believe we have our administrator participating online. Could we
Yep.
please bring Joshua forward?
Now I gotta find out what tab that's on. I was logged out halfway through all of that and suddenly my notes and the things I'm looking at just disappeared. from the
Oh,
screen.
can't do it.
Got it. Sorry, that's right. I am the host.
We're working on it, Josh.
Let me fix that.
This button. And this button.
Okay,
This button.
yep. Promote to panelists. There we go.
And
So who's got their hand up in the audience? Was there?
Josh.
That's Joshua
Okay.
Rickman, who is the administrator for the WRTA. And he's coming on in now.
Hey, Josh.
Good evening.
Look at that. We can hear him. We can see him. Boom chakalaka. Welcome.
just say, we're
You're so
really
happy
confident
today.
that we're
Really
really
appreciate
busy,
it.
So.
Appreciate you being here.
Of
All
course.
right. So can we pull up the presentation on the big screen?
Sure can.
And then Josh, you can kind of like walk us through. Because especially where the van is new to the town of Berlin. I had I have it around here somewhere, the Connect thing that went out in the paper, went out in the mail
Absolutely.
the other day.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
fantastic.
This is not gonna
All right.
be full screen on here, is it?
So while they're pulling up, if you want to tell us, like who you are, why you're here, what you're doing, that would be great.
Absolutely. So thank you so much again for having me today. My name's Josh Rickman. I am the administrator for WRTA. I joined at WRTA in August of 23, so about a year and a half or so into the job. And I've been working with all the communities, Worcester and the 36 surrounding communities. And early on in the process, I met with Bob Blair, Robert Blair, and we've been talking a lot about Berlin needs. And I think we found a pretty creative solution for the next 14, 15 months or so. So happy to kind of run through this presentation now. So you go to the next slide.
Thank you.
Awesome. So as I said, Berlin really hasn't had any WRTA service really since 2018. So it's been a number of years since there's been any transit service that WRTA has provided or found another service provider like MWR to provide. So as I shared, I did meet with Robert Blair, who is the advisory member for the town of Berlin back in fall 2023, and he was new in his role and I was new in my role. So we kept kind of the dialogue going, but he was just reiterating, there's certainly a need within town, but really there's a growing need towards the east, Hudson, Marlboro, but there's also a need to kind of go towards Worcester for UMass Chan and medical appointments. So kind of keeping that in mind, understanding there's still some volunteer driver program, which are great. We're seeing a lot of communities such as Berlin. We just kind of kept the dialogue moving forward. And we'll go to the next slide, please.
Sorry, hold on one second. There we
That's
go.
okay. And so when the summer of 24 rolled around, Mass DOT released a transit connectivity grant. And this grant really focused in on ways in which to better coordinate services between RTAs. Many of the RTAs throughout the state, there's 15 of us from the Berkshires to Cape Cod. A lot of us kind of have our focal point, right in the middle, like Worcester for WRTA. And so there's really a need for us to say, how can we strengthen our borders? And Berlin is one of those bordering communities at MWRTA. So this grant, again, focus on that as 100% state funded. So there's no money from the WRTA, no money from the town. It's kind of 100% grant funded for the trial period. So understanding that, I said, you know what, we got to talk to Bob about this, talk to the town and see, is this something we want to pursue as a way to say, is this a way to solve at least that connection for in-town and getting towards the east in concert with Administrator Jim Need for MWRTA. And so, that's exactly what it does. So because in town and to Hudson and to points of interest in Marlboro, and those points are downtown Marlboro, Marlboro Hospital, and the Apex Center in Marlboro as well. So they're kind of the 3 points within Marlboro you can transfer to as well. We were awarded the grant and started the new service in February 17th of this year. So just about 4 weeks ago. Next slide, please. So, what is microtransit? So microtransit isn't like a big bus service where we kind of go up and down one road, back and forth. Microtransit is really connecting somebody from their origin to the destination. So from their home to Highland Commons or to a medical appointment and then back. It is a shared ride service, so you might ride with somebody else on that trip. But instead of just sticking to a dedicated route, it can kind of go all within those 2 towns you see there in Berlin and in Hudson. Pick up and drop off kind of curb to curb along those 2 areas. Right now it's available weekdays 6:45 a.m. to 6:45 p.m. and on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. No Sunday service as of right now. Next slide, please. So how does someone book this trip? Well, like everything, we do have the mobile apps that are available, and on the screen you see a couple of QR codes, one for the iPhone and one for the Android. And this is the Catch Connect app. So you basically go into the app, you create a little account using an email, and it knows where you are. It says where you want to get dropped off to. And typically within 15-20 minutes, you will have a vehicle arriving to you to move you on to your destination. Right now, the Catch Connect is fare-free through June 30 of this year, thanks to the Fair Share Amendment funding that we received from the state. But before that, it was $2 a ride. So it's still a pretty good deal, even before fare-free, considering it's kind of that point-to-point. In terms of what you can bring on board, it's really what people can bring on comfortably. They do ask that less than, kind of 4 shopping bags, so you don't take up other seats, don't get things in the aisle, creating a tripping hazard, or 3 pieces of luggage, making sure they don't, get too large or again, in the aisle or taking up other seat. Next slide, please. So what kind of vehicle? You'll see right there, that is one of the MWRTA Catch Connect vehicles. Administrator Jim Nee and I rode, I think 2 Fridays ago. We went from Highland Commons to right down to the town offices there, and it was a great ride. So how far in advance can you book your trip? Basically, it's at the time of booking. So you can't say, you know what, tomorrow I need a trip or this Saturday I need a trip. It's really, okay, at this time I need a trip. And you have to be prepared to take that trip within 15 to 20 minutes of that time. Then in terms of how you connect to Marlboro, I did list there's specific points in Marlboro you can get to, like downtown Marlboro, Marlboro Hospital, Apex Center. But you can also connect to the fixed route buses at the Solomon Pond Mall, or go to the downtown Newton and Weed Street transfer point, and you can connect any other MWRTA bus from that location. Next slide, please. In terms of promotional efforts, one was already mentioned, we did do an every door direct mailer. We find that to be a really effective means to kind of launch new service. A lot of people will pick it up and read it. We did a press release and working with Kristen to talk about any type of future efforts, maybe with Melissa at the COA or anything that the select board might think of, or members of the public. We're open to hear those. Certainly want to see great utilization. And I would share, since February 17th, we've already seen over 30 users, which, considering there hasn't been anybody using transit in 7 years, it's great to see the first 3 weeks seeing a really good ridership results out of that. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, MWRTA and WRTA will be setting up monthly meetings and providing updates, which we'll certainly be passing back along to the town. We'll be tracking ridership and use patterns under the grant to understand, when is this service being used, where are people trying to travel to, what are those needs, and also continue that discussion, that dialogue of there are points to the west that people still want to get to, into that Worcester-centric area, and now how can we better support that? So understanding kind of those use patterns, we can start to develop a conversation about what future funding for this might look like. Right now, this is fully paid for through June 30 of 2026 via the grant. And so after that, there would be a conversation about, how do we further support this service moving forward? Typically speaking, that is something that's done through the cherry sheet assessment process. So that would be something that would be taken from the town to support the service that we provided. And I think at that point, it'd be that larger conversation of, is the Catch Connect the right fit? Is our needs going somewhere else? And really, what will the budget allow for, over that long term? Next slide. I think that's going to be it. And just again, thank you so much for the time. You know, one of the efforts here is really just to spread the word, encourage people to use it, and you know, further this dialogue and conversation to really identify, you know, what the future needs are for the town. And just thank you so much.
Just Josh, to clarify, this service is actually open to all residents, you know,
Correct.
young, old, there's no means testing, you know, there's just, you could call up and take this over.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I think I skipped over that. There is a call feature as well. You can call in to, I think it's 508-283-5083. As long as you're ready for the time of booking, you can also book via phone.
And so this clearly could potentially help sort of folks if they had jobs at the mall or Highland Commons to get to and from their work without necessarily needing to have a car on their own, or they might walk or bike on good days, but on
Correct.
rainy days, take this over to help them maintain their jobs.
Absolutely. 100%.
No, this is great, especially where we have an elderly population in town. And I know that we're looking for drivers for our COA van. You know, this is a nice alternative to make sure that they get out and that their needs can be met as well. And I like the door to door, so you don't have to try and get to someplace to take it. Toot toot, here I am. Come on out.
Exactly. It's
Which does ask a question. So if somebody is physically challenged and in a wheelchair, no issues with that?
Yep, no issues. All of those vehicles are wheelchair accessible with tie downs, and all of the drivers have been trained to do those tie downs. So yep, they're 100% accessible.
And I know for our COA drivers that we require first aid, I
Mhm.
think. CPR. And CPR, how are your drivers on that?
Yeah, so I'll double check with MWRTA because these are MWRTA drivers, so I can certainly provide follow-up to Kristen on all the training that they receive, but they do receive a lot of training in terms of being
Awesome.
able to drive these vehicles. I can give a more detailed answer via email on that.
Okay, and we can get this up on the website too, so folks can blast it out there. Maybe we can do a little ditty in the next Powder House news, or did you? Okay.
It's on the
website
and on Facebook. Yay, all done. All right. Any other questions?
No, but thanks, Josh. I look forward to seeing how this progresses.
Yes, feel free to come back and, you know, in 6 months and show us lovely graphs of ridership going off the charts and the need for more buses and more hours, and we got you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. A pleasure presenting tonight.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Josh.
Thank you.
All right.
I can chart right.
All right, so we're gonna take a 5-minute recess. I have 8:17,
Yep.
8:22, be
Yes.
there, be square.
Easily.
Watch out for the,
Right. Because I can't step out for a second and have the meeting continue.
oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Peggy, just sit there and talk to herself.
I do talk to myself. I'm looking for my pen cap. It's killing me.
Yeah. I didn't want to say that about.
Is it in your chair?
No, it slipped off, baby.
Hi, how are you? Nice job.
I'm Susan.
color. I'm gorgeous on it.
You are
so gorgeous.
My
feeling.
my little OCD is
I
gonna
like
come.
my certificate for my ethics training. Yes, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, they just keep sending me emails.
Constant.
Is it a different email than you used before?
No.
They just keep sending me all these things. You have to take it.
Okay,
Did you just retake it? Cause you know, you have to redo it.
yeah,
Every year or two.
in February.
I just took it. I just did. And use the same exact.
Hi,
email.
Frank. Bye,
The
Tim.
login is the same email.
Thank you. That's all you do.
Okay.
I am.
I was over All right, we are back. Woo-hoo! It is 8:21. So we're gonna shift a couple items around on the agenda. While we are alert and awake, we are going to talk about the annual town meeting warrant. So, question, are we starting at 7:30 or are we starting at 6:30 for town meeting? Didn't we start at 6:30 last time?
Annual town meeting is prescribed in the bylaw
Yeah,
as the
7:30.
first
7:30.
Yeah, definitely.
Monday at 7:30 of May.
So what we have done, although it's too late to do it now, and I'm not, well, is that we do a special town meeting with a different town meeting before the regular town meeting, which is
Oh,
a silly way of doing it, and I'm not necessarily a fan. I think we start at 7:30 and at some point we do a bylaw change to say 7 o'clock and
Yep. Okay.
or you could just take the time out of the bylaw, then you could make it whenever you wanted.
yeah, I don't know how many people are like referring to the bylaw when they're trying to figure out what time town meeting is too.
Right. I mean, the date makes sense.
Right,
But
Right.
time.
Right,
not
it's
so
always the
much.
first Monday.
Because then on a long agenda, you could start it earlier.
Yep.
Shorter agenda, you could start a little later.
Exactly.
Bring your cushions and beverages.
I remind people all the time to bring cushions to town meeting, and I don't see many people doing it. I have several different cushions based on what chair I think I'll end up with. I'll
This
bring
is,
two different, because it's gonna be 2 nights, so I'll bring different
Mhm.
cushions tonight.
all right, Kristen, you want to take us through? So Article 1 is to talk about prior year's expenses, a favorite, she said sarcastically, of
Is
again,
there any?
bills coming in late that we need to pay.
I don't have any in hand right now, but I'm still confirming with the department heads.
Okay.
There's one right now. You do have one? Okay,
There
perfect.
is
One. We'll get that in
Great.
there.
All right,
Every year we say it's the last one, we're never doing it again.
and we
every year
never
do it
did,
again.
yeah.
This looks funky when I put it in Google. It looked regular in
It-
Word.
If you
It's-
write it in Google, you don't have that problem here, really.
That's true.
All right, so the second one is our other favorite one, she said sarcastically, to talk about the sunset clause removal.
Yep, and June is confirming. We don't believe we have any, but just it's on there.
It's on there as a
just to
placeholder.
make sure. Yep.
Okay. Conservation is getting some money from Solomon Pond, but it's not the full 50 because they needed some.
Correct. There was an overpayment previously. I want to say it was about 10 years back. And the mall asked if they could take that amount off of this year's payment. We did confirm with accounting that was the amount that was paid in excess.
Is this year their last year?
That's what I was gonna ask.
One more year, I believe.
Okay.
It's 26 that it
Okay.
expires.
All right, next up is repurpose funding for library capital funding.
It's gonna be Scott's favorite article on the whole town meeting. We have a May 2006 town meeting special article that's still open. They would like to, it's for capital uses at the library. They would like to expand that use to fund a space use analysis and interior improvements and spend the money.
Yep, that'll be fine.
So they have $14,775 left in that article.
All right, so this landfill study, that was the one that
That's
Paul
the
was referencing, so we'll take that out and chuck it to
Well,
fall when we have
Yep.
a little bit more.
yeah, there won't be enough details to have
Okay,
a,
Right.
especially since we harp on other people about coming with vague stuff to
correct. Yep.
warrant articles. Like, I don't want us to perpetuate that.
Right, so
Okay.
that'll bring you from a 27 to a 26 article town meeting, which is shorter than normal. We're
We-
normally in the
we-
30s.
We could pull it off in one night, so.
Okay. All right, capital improvement.
Plan.
I'm not asking about what we
Thank
have
you.
free cash, so we'll
Getting
just
really
keep
close.
moving on. I know that, yay.
Yay.
All right,
Yep, Article 7, budget and or potential override debt exclusion. Those are just on there as placeholders in
For
case they're needed.
capital, you're talking that Article 6 is all of town and all of school?
So the way we did this last year is it's just descriptive for the school because the school funding comes out of the operating budget.
Well,
we had
the
no
school
place
funding
to
is also
spell it
one
out.
number that we're not allowed to adjust by a penny.
Correct. So what we had, and we can change it, but what we had decided last year was to
Yep.
spell them out
Yep.
as part of the capital
that's fine.
section in the
That's fine.
description.
okay.
And then the next 3 articles are the appointed town clerk.
Well, back
Well, you
to
missed
sorry,
seven.
operating budget. So the
Oh, I
operating
skipped
budget
budget,
and
sorry.
or override, so that, what is,
And or debt exclusion.
what is the mechanics for an override or debt exclusion?
So it requires, those require a town meeting vote
Right,
and a ballot vote at the annual town election. So when we get to Article now 26, you will see the questions that are on there. It will need to be added if that's the direction that the board moves in. Right now, we have still excess levy, but it's the capital items that are likely in excess of what we have available in free cash, which would potentially be a debt exclusion depending on the size. And there is a huge list for BMS that's still about 1.4 million. And I know that the schools were going to talk about narrowing that down, and they have kind of highlighted
Yeah.
some of them in their
Yeah.
presentation. So I just need to see what they're going to actually vote on, and then we can decide how we're going to
Right.
pay for it.
And so if we do the budget sort of section by section.
Yep.
At what point is the vote saying, do you have to say like, then this line is subject to a debt exclusion? So like, line, I don't have my numbers in front, actually I do here somewhere, but line 400, which I have no idea what it is, but we say that's part of a debt exclusion, or that's part of an override?
So,
or-
yeah, I would pull out that line item, as we usually have done anyways. We've pulled out the school
Right.
sections of the budget and vote through it as the debt exclusion and or override in that section of the budget.
So we do a motion like that we move $2 million for this thing, and that this thing will be part of an override.
Yep, and there's very prescribed language in the Prop
Yeah.
2.5 primer, if you will, from the state that we would use.
I did add up their highlighted ones, from the new one, and good old peg math, let's just call it like 750,000.
Okay,
That there were, I think, 3 for BMS and 4 for Tohoto, or it could be flipped.
and that was a total of 750?
Just for the unhighlighted ones, yeah.
Okay. And, from my listening to the budget subcommittee meeting last week, it was clear that this is the administration's budget that's coming forward, and the school committee may choose to make other decisions. So I do want to just wait and see what that final vote is,
Mhm.
and then we'll know.
Okay.
So these I can move if we want to
Yeah.
put money together. I forgot I had put these in here.
Right, that's fine.
That's the appointed town clerk, constables, and trustee of trusts.
Right.
Actually, it should be trustee of trusts, not trustees. I think. And then the next one as well, which is the special legislation to become a 5-member select board.
Right, I ultimately push all those to after things that involve money.
Do that. I'm just gonna move them right now.
Well, if you move them now, that's gonna renumber. them,
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's why I hate numbering them, because I always have to renumber everything multiple times, but that's all right.
Yeah, otherwise we're doing, what was, right, we need at least a temporary numbers to have these
You
conversations.
do
so,
it,
yeah.
and that's okay. I renumber the budget
Yeah.
too, so. Article 12 will be a special article. We are going to be 6 years out from our FY20 class and comp plan. I need to get a refreshed quote. I did get a quote last year and it was $9,000. So we may be able to do less than this monetarily, but I just put that in as a placeholder.
And as was pointed out, that the one we did in 2020 was the first one we've done in town history that we know about, so that,
Okay.
we did 150 years or two, so between founding the town and the first one, and so we don't have to do it at this point, but I'm fine with it still being on here at this point. I agree it should be done on a regular basis, and society is changing at a rapid enough pace that being able to keep up with these things is important.
Absolutely. All right, Article 13 is the special article that the why does that say assessor? Sorry. The fire chief requested, he went to Capitol and asked for the money for a fire EMS maintenance and equipment fund. We talked about this a little bit before. It doesn't really meet the definition of capital unless an individual item is over $10,000, which at that point, they would go to Capitol to get approval.
I'll go back that I hate all special funds, that we have so many tiny funds, each
Yeah.
one of which needs to be audited, each one needs to be tracked, each one needs, when we get $100 in interest in the savings account, we have to divide it between all these funds based on a proportional way. It is adding work. Every one of these funds add work. So June is right, adding one more doesn't substantially change our world, but it's
still
death by
changes it.
1,000 cuts. And so, I know he's requesting it, but I'm not sold on it.
And I think that's fair. The reason that I would use this mechanism, if it's something that we're going to do, is because we have razor thinned the budget. So my concern in going to the reserve fund is that we're going to run out.
I don't think reserve, we have dozens of funds all over the place. And so none of our capital preservation funds, none of our stabilization funds with all their wording on it.
I mean, nothing that wouldn't require another town meeting vote. Outside of the reserve fund or an article.
And so why don't we do a fund that's just, building and vehicle maintenance for the whole town? And so you don't have this for, because I just, we have one for town hall, we have one for the school, we have one for police, we have one for fire, we have one for highway. Again, it's just simpler, smaller, simpler.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I had a placeholder at one point, like, well, police could really use this and Fred could really use this for the building. So it does actually make sense to have one if we're gonna do that.
I mean, things break. He has one in place for the shared truck with
Yep.
Clinton. I mean, we're trying to put money
Well-
aside for the building, so it just makes sense to have a general pot. And then once you have that pot o' money, you can say, I started with 30
Right.
and 10 went for
Right.
new tires and 3
Transmission
went to
blue.
blah, 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 so,
Hydraulic pump blue.
yep.
And I think then once it's established, because I thought you need one article to establish and one article to fund it.
If it's a special article, you can establish and
I-
fund
I
together.
prefer one vote, because
Yep.
if one passes, we're gonna create the fund, but we're not gonna put any money into it. It just doesn't make sense. So.
Right, exactly.
And this would be distributed at the vote of the select board?
So this typically, if it's under 10, it can be. If it's under 10, it would require that capital planning committee approval. The way that we did the HR budget this past year, which we haven't used yet,
Right.
yay, was a vote of the select board and the FinCom.
Alright.
So I don't know
That's
how you
fine.
feel about that.
I want to just make sure that there is accountability, and as much as we trust all staff, that staff aren't just saying, hey, I need $30,000 because I think the truck is faded enough and I want a new paint
Right.
job. And
Yep.
Sure.
I want some accountability back to elected officials.
Can you
elected
also,
officials.
Kristen, update, on the line that says to see if the town blah, blah, blah. I mean, you added building and vehicle in yellow above, so
Oh, yeah.
can you just make that similar?
I sure will. How would you feel if that is the case about upping that funding a little bit? Because now you're adding all police, highway, vehicles and buildings into it.
I mean, as we've heard from Fred, his stuff breaks just because it's used
Right.
so often and it's brutal.
And he hates coming for a reserve
I
fund
know.
transfer, which I know, but his is the most volatile budget, which
Yeah.
I've told him. I would think you might want to do 50.
We can do 50, and then we can look at some of the other line items that typically are used to fund this.
Mhm.
And I view this as like an extraordinary unanticipated expense above and beyond any
Yep.
routine maintenance
Yep.
that would be in the operating budget.
Yeah, I think you only have to read some of Fred's reports to know what some of those are.
Absolutely. All right, then Article 14 would be to transfer some funding to OPEB stabilization. Last year we did 85,000. The town policy recommends 10%, but it's only a recommendation. So once I have those free cash numbers, I
And
can
there's
let
no,
you guys
the
know.
state wants us to fund this, but
Yeah,
doesn't
We can
require
only-
it. And so we could put 10 or 15 in it every year. It'd still be better than most towns.
you
I
can.
think the 80 we put in there already puts us better than most towns in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I believe there are only 3, unless the last time I checked, which was a couple of years ago, there were only, I think, 3 towns that fully funded or cities that fully fund their outstanding OPEB liability. They
Right.
just want to see progress.
Right, I'm sure you're gonna see pick up the paper, whether it's the community advocate or whatever, that towns are like us, so. If there's a need to save money,
Right.
Right.
I would make this a $20,000 or $25,000 number unless we suddenly discover we have a lot of extra free cash.
Okay.
You can leave it dashes for now. I just,
Okay, I didn't know if
I
that
don't
was a
remember.
motion.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
it's not a motion.
just.
I was just chatting out loud for a while.
Okay. And then Article 15 would be transferring funds to general stabilization. We typically do 10%. That one is more not regulated, but more recommended by DOR.
Right. Although I think our balance in stabilization is already above what DOR recommends.
I was just gonna say,
I don't think we need
We
to.
have to check.
I'd keep it here for now, but I'm ready to cut this one when we get our free cash number and see where other things are at.
Yep. All right. And then these two kind of go together. One is a monetary one, which is establishing the revolving fund annual spending limits. But before we do that, we need to amend the transfer station revolving fund to include wages because they are trying to add some additional hours for the transfer station admin. So 15 and.
Yep.
What was it? 15, 16 and 17 go together.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, only because it's part of 17. You have the other funds, we also have the spending limits.
Right, exactly. It would be kind of a little odd to do it later.
Oh, look, there's Fred's bucket truck expenses. There you go. Boom, chaka-laka.
It's in there.
Okay.
All right, and then Article 18 would be funding cable access. Their annual budget, they've requested $68,010.
But
And
again, that's
again,
not
I-
from tax dollars. It's from the fees we get from
Charter.
charter.
That is.
And again, I really thought that this was my money because
Right.
it said PEG spending, but
So when I'm at town meeting and have to describe it, I will describe it as that Peg is not here without spending money,
There you go.
which is true. It's just not her, it's her own money and not town money, but still.
So we should actually do CPA next then and move the.
Yeah.
Transfer.
Yeah.
Is that the right address, by the way? I meant to ask you, is 8 Lancaster Road, Legion Hall? Because remember you guys had 2 articles you were asking for at town meeting, and I didn't know if I pulled the correct one.
I'll
No,
look it up.
it's
No, because
Lincoln.
it's gonna have to be Lincoln.
Lincoln.
not-
Lincoln Road.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
gonna be on
I'll
Lincoln
fix
Road.
that. Thank
Yeah.
you. It didn't say in the description, so I went,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Lancaster is
yeah.
the speedway into the back roads of Clinton.
right.
of course, as I was doing this, I went Googling and could not find an address
Yeah.
for the Legion on the internet. Lincoln Road. so
And we
we'll fix
still
that.
have, I mean, every week we're gonna iterate this a little bit closer and tighter, but
Yes.
that really, there's a couple more weeks, because Housing Trust meets on the 26th, but that's too late to really do much more. Like if they decide on the 26th, they want to pull it, or you can always pull it on the floor, but I'd
You
rather
can.
not list it if it's not gonna happen.
It's not
think
a
we're still working.
financial article, so I would say if the select board wants to pull it off before that first week of April, when it
Yeah.
goes to the printer, we could do that.
And we're still working some things out.
Okay. The next 4 articles then would be the CPA, Community Preservation. The first is their annual budget. The second would be the first of 3 projects, $30,000 to provide parking and access to Horseshoe Pond and the Mount Pisgah Trail Network to be expended by the Conservation Commission, rather. The next project is $13,500 from the Historical Preservation Fund to fund a consultant to, I'm so bad at that word, accessioning
I know, I see
and
that. word.
deaccessioning, is that how you
Yes.
say it? Okay.
It's basically making sure the clothing collection gets properly stored and maintained so that it's still there for future generations to work on.
Okay, do they like document it and put descriptions and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
When these articles get read, it's gonna actually put us, not just Community Preservation Act project. They'll say Article 21, parking at Mount
oh, yeah,
Pisgah, I mean, even if it just said the name of the department on it, but it just, because if you currently have, 22, 21, 22, 23, all with the same subject line,
right.
that'll only cause minor confusion somewhere.
I will fix that. Let me just highlight those so I go back and do that. All right. And then the third is ours, which we took on, which would be $10,000 to engage the architect to design the new entrance to the front of 1870, which would be that front staircase of death. So that's actually not,
Not that,
CPA.
I've
No,
definitely seen worse stairs.
I'm being
but yes.
dramatic. It's fun to be dramatic.
But this is also just the design part too, but that's how we do things. Let's prove the divine and then get the costs. Yep.
This is gonna be, so if maybe this one should be called 1870 stair design or something like that. All right, and then Article 24, earth removal, and actually that should say, and importation bylaw. And there's a couple of things we need to work through on this. I have not yet approached the Board of Health, but in talking to legal counsel, and they actually recommended I get some advice from Weston and Sampson on this, if it should be the Board of Health or the Select Board as the Earthworks Board.
What about
Right.
planning?
That's what I thought initially. I guess most towns use their Board of Health for this. It's soil regulation.
Yeah. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I have a strong opinion that it should not be a new independent on its own, looking for volunteers sort of group. So either Board of Health or us.
Yep.
And I think it is if Board of Health would like to do it, they're welcome to it. If they don't, I am fine with us taking it on. I don't feel a need to force it upon them.
Mm-mm. And I'm not gonna say anything about how often it's been used in the past years, because it'll jinx it, so we can just move on.
Absolutely. One thing we want to look at, and this is where they were thinking Weston and Sampson, who has helped us as in a consulting capacity with soil importation for many years, could make some recommendations on the amount. We know that it should be higher than 100 cubic yards because that makes us have to do like any house that goes in for a driveway or any small walkway. But the recommended numbers that I've heard floated around were anywhere from like 1,000 up to 10,000. So we need to have that
For
conversation too.
education, how many cubic yards are in like a truck? Not a dump truck, but
Like an 18-wheeler.
18-wheeler.
Tons, metric tons are in there. I'll look it up.
I just,
Yeah, I
right,
can't
think
think
a
off the
pickup
top
truck
of
or
my head.
two, or I don't think anyone really is
Right.
upset about a truck or two. I think when you start talking about dozens or hundreds of trucks over decades, that's where you start having it. And so
Right.
I think, if you had more than 2 or 3 dump trucks,
Mhm.
But the way this is written, if you recall, we did have one, was it in 23 or very beginning of 24? For a horse farm?
right,
Yes.
but they were, and we probably should for that. And a lot of it was moving on their own property too,
Correct.
is how they eventually got around this.
And it's
So-
triggered by sand, gravel, or stone. So you also, anytime you're essentially
Yeah.
doing a driveway, it could get triggered if it's a long enough driveway.
So an 18-wheeler truck can usually carry about 10 to 14 cubic yards of dirt.
Oh, it's not
What is-
metric,
What is a
density.
dirt cubic
Okay.
yard?
18-wheelers, so 100 would still be 10 trucks.
Mhm.
And so maybe we don't want it to be 10,000.
Okay,
Plus two, we also need to look at bridges and weights around town, that if you're gonna have multiple trucks going over, are you going to say you can only go up, you cannot, blah, blah, blah?
I don't think we can or would want to regulate routes in a
Okay.
bylaw, but that would be something that could be part of the permit process.
Okay. All right, that we give actually police some skin in the game to actually do something instead of just going up and being, Scott, please don't drive up that road again. I mean,
They should have the rights to enforce speed limit laws and bridge
I know,
laws.
They do.
okay.
You don't have a right to, you're right, when, what is it, the legal agreement we put together?
Yeah.
We didn't write into it as a town, we didn't write into it enforcements.
That is true. And I'm not sure because of that particularly being a settlement agreement, if
Right.
there were specific things, and even under administrative consent order from the DEP,
Right.
there are certain things you can regulate and other things that
Right.
you
You can't.
cannot.
Okay.
Right, we weren't party to it, so I don't know what.
Yeah, I am not certain.
Yep.
But, so just a couple of questions on that
Yep.
to still be hammered out.
The bylaw would allow us, if we granted a permit, to put an end date on a permit. That yes, it's 10,000 cubic yards, but you only have
Till tomorrow. to bring
reasonable,
it.
I wouldn't do it
Yeah.
till tomorrow, but I mean,
Day
you
after.
have 2 years to bring it in. And so if it's not done in 2 years, it's not like you could grab these 10,000 cubic yards over the next 17 decades.
So it provides for a renewal permit.
Is there a fee?
And there's a fee for both. It's $500 for a new permit and $250 for a renewal. I thought it was an annual, but now I'm trying to find where it said that.
And again, the problem with legal stuff is you can't write like, we will be reasonable in it, because different people disagree on what reasonable is.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the mechanisms are in there. They're gonna go through this, so I don't wanna bog down, because
Yeah.
it's quarter of and we still gotta duke some stuff out.
Okay,
And so we should be thinking about it. We'll talk more at the next one. We need to publicize this too. This is a complicated thing. It's
Probably.
clarifying a couple of other stuff, starting getting people out there so they can see it and talk about it. We could potentially, hear something we totally missed, so that on the floor we could say, oh, we want to do an amendment that says, we forgot the word not in the sentence, and it got by all of us. And really, the word not really makes this
Scrivener's error.
right.
All right. And then the last two are zoning bylaws.
Right, both of which will also take some,
Yep, especially the ADU.
right,
Yes.
the ADU. So, I mean, I think that, I mean, even though we only have some 26 or 27 articles, you know, the 3 bylaw amendments could easily take an entire evening all by themselves.
They are substantive,
Right.
so sure.
Which I would, again, try to set it up so you do, again, which is almost how it's written right now, is fiscal stuff first, sort of other, you know, the election official stuff, and then end with these 3
Okay.
that are sort of the meat of changing the way we do things in town.
So we'll do current fiscal year, then financials,
And then end with the 3 big bylaws. Oh, that's right.
and
Right.
with bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I will rearrange that accordingly. And that's really it.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Now-
For the main event.
Quarter 9 with all of us in our best behavior after being here 3 hours.
that's right. We come to the most fun part of tonight's meeting. Say it with me,
Budgets.
Budget.
budget.
And you guys don't usually get to see me past 9 o'clock, but the FinCom does, and I get a little punchy, so you'll have to bear
I've seen
with
you
me.
past 9 o'clock, so let us do this, because I don't want to drag and argue and fist fight. Not that we would ever
No.
fist fight, but let's put a time limit on this, because I don't want to drone.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
9:15. Can we do a half hour?
I would at least check in at past 9. I'd like to see how far we can get, and if we're close and put another 10 minutes in,
Okay.
put another 10 minutes in.
All right.
You're right, I don't want to be here at 10.
All right, so we will check in at
Yep.
9:15 on the budget. So Kristen, you gonna put it up on the screen, and where do you want to start?
I sure am. Starting is your preference. I know you started at the bottom last
Yeah,
time. Do
I
you
think
wanna?
top down is fine,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All right, let me just pull this up.
because I don't
And-
get to my big marks until 3 or 4. So
Sorry, Dee.
I'm gonna look what I did here.
Scott's loading up. He's got his power cord in. He is
I was
ready to
gonna say,
roll.
I brought my power cord
Power
tonight.
cord, I have variance versus expenditure, I have a
Mhm.
printed copy with handwritten notes on it, I have an electronic copy without handwritten
Oh, no,
notes
it's
on it.
on.
And then I have my email that reminds me of the things I wanted to talk about.
Okay. We are good to go.
So if we look at 100, which is actually one, if we look at page 1.
Yep.
Which is, that takes us through line 31, let's go through line 30, because 31 breaks a section. The only ones I had, well, the ones I had questions on was the consulting fee line.
Okay,
Maybe I should start off by saying this. I don't think there's any fraud, waste, or abuse of any substance in
No.
this town at all. I believe all of our town workers are good. I think our town volunteers stretch pennies the best they can. I'm gonna propose eliminating some town services tonight, not because I think they are not good services. I think they are good services. I think they add some value. I think we might not be able to afford them. And I think if you're going to ultimately figure out a way to lower taxes, we have to make things simpler and smaller. And so by not, so very few things I'm looking at actually
Mhm.
reducing numbers in, because there's that, I think I'm trying to eliminate some things which cuts the number of checks, cuts the number of funds, cuts the number of administrative overhead that takes it to work. And I can say I have confidently that I have not talked to anyone publicly about these, and so the committees and groups affected by this will be hearing it for the first time. In some respects, because it's a small town,
You can-
I don't want to talk to someone and then they'd say, hey, Peg, what do you think of Scott's idea? And
Correct.
so I've been waiting for this, and we'll start talking to more people sort of after this. I am fine to lose some of these, by the way. I'm making an attempt. I would love people who think I've cut too deeply to advocate viciously for their programs. Some might have to do it on the floor of town meeting to argue that we should be spending tax dollars on these things. And it's funny, with that start, I'd like to just cut a couple $1,000s of consulting and make it 17.5 instead of 25. We only spent 14,000 in the last year I tracked. We've not generally spent all of it.
We didn't for a couple of years because for 2 summer, this is basically with Weston and Sampson for Maplewood. That's the only thing we use it for. So they were low for a couple of years
they're
because the
starting to
project was
crank
on
up.
hold and they're starting back up. So that would be my only concern there.
All right, so I will counter you, Scott.
Yep.
And again, open for discussion. The stipend, the select board. I think it's nice that we have that, but at the same time, we also need to show that we're
Yep.
doing our part. I mean, honestly, with the number of hours that you break down, it comes down to like $2.50 an hour that we're getting paid. I
I'm
would,
totally fine zeroing it out.
then I'm okay with killing the stipend after.
Well, for
July.
next year, yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
Completely, not just the increase.
yeah, completely.
Completely, because then.
No one's doing this job for $1,000.
No. So then, if for some reason the town gets a windfall and there's something, but you know what, we need to show that we have skin in the game too, so.
Yep.
4,000 isn't gigantic dollars, but 4,000 could help. 4,000 could, Scott could say, I want to whap off something for 3,500, and we're like, oh, boom, chakalaka, it's right there.
Well, but it's also, it's 3 or 5 fewer checks. It
Correct.
is less payroll taxes we have to track. It's less money that has to go into Worcester retirement or whatever the
Yep.
place that goes to. I am fine with that being zeroed out.
Okay. So
It's-
do
it's
we
the
want to
other
do a couple more of these line items and then take a vote on
Yeah, I would
them
get that one.
together?
Yep.
Okay. Do we
And
want to go
so-
back to consulting?
Yeah, so consulting, I was just trying to find a little bit there, because my ultimate goal is to get a number that,
Mhm.
the town amount of increase is 0 or less than 0.
How about 18?
18 sold,
Thanks. Okay.
especially since we cut 4,000 more that I didn't have on my original list.
All right, so consulting is going down to 18
Yep.
from 2,500.
Yeah, so it's going down $2,500.
Okay,
So we're okay with everything
Yep.
above this?
Yes,
The moderator, the.
yeah. I
we
mean,
do
at
have
some
to
point,
upgrade Town administrator.
at some point I'd cut those out, but those are affecting other people's
Yep.
incomes more than affecting ours. And so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
ready for that yet.
So I did just change the town administrator one to be
Yep.
concurrent with what
That's
the
fine.
vote was that was just
Yep.
taken this evening. Just for those who are watching at home.
Yep.
And then we have wages and expenses.
Yep.
I did want to talk about the HR expense for a moment if we could.
Mhm.
That is where I had put some money for the police union negotiations. So I did want to reduce that to help offset that $180,000 increase because that was the purpose. And initially I had backed it down to 10 because my thought was to put 45 in. Because we aren't through with the chief negotiations, my thought was to park again a little bit of funding there for those negotiations.
So what number are you looking at?
30. And that would also include any HR expenses, vacation payout,
So
onboarding.
HR expenses are not an HR consultant. This is actually to,
No,
This
instead
was
of,
the-
instead of a reserve fund transfer, you would use these dollars.
that's correct.
this was, I quit, I need my 4 weeks of vacation.
Or 7 or however
Yeah.
many we have to pay out, or if we had onboarding expenses, those
Yep.
could be there.
So it'll be 30 now.
That was my recommendation.
So I'm looking at trying to cut the reserve fund because we only spent 67,000 in the year that I looked at, which was, and so it's up to 110. I'd be fine with some money in HR expenses if we then do some cutting of the reserve fund because we've added padding that both allows us to transfer between line items and allows us for something that we don't know what the cost is of yet.
I think the only one that I've added that padding, if you will, to is the HR expenses. My
Oh, yeah,
only
that's the one, yeah.
concern is that I've cut like legal and some of the other budgets so thin that I'd be afraid that we might have to go back to town meeting to replenish the reserve fund.
Which we have a town meeting in December to do.
Right. Unless for some reason we don't need one, but,
Right.
Which is always preferable.
Right. Although we've already parked a couple articles on it.
True.
Peg, your thoughts?
You know, and I'm honestly, right now, I am okay with the 110 and the 30 only because I'm curious to hear other
Yep.
cost-cutting
Yep.
measures, so we can easily go back up to
Yep.
them, but instead of being draconian at the top, let's just whittle our way down.
Being draconian later on.
I know.
This is the easiest stuff.
Okay,
I am fine actually through audit and assessor and treasurer collector, legal and personnel.
Okay.
Tax title. Again, we've spent only $2,000 or $3,000 in the last several years on that line item. I mean, it was higher at one point. But I am thinking that that's a number that is better lower. I don't think I'd lower it tons. Let's try 7,500 and see what that gets us.
I'd be comfortable with that. I know the intention of the treasurer collector is to kick that activity up a bit. It's something that we haven't been doing and they want to make sure we are doing it, but I think, you know, we still have some cleanup to do, so that would make sense to give that a lower number a shot.
I am fine with the rest of that page. Because you already you found some efficiencies in data systems already.
Yes.
The town clerk, I'm not sold on the supplemental stuff, but I think the supplemental stuff's for another week once we see where we end up with a number later on at the bottom.
right.
I actually did not recommend any supplements
Right, I know.
in my
Yeah,
budget,
yeah.
but certainly can have the conversation.
Well, and don't forget, yeah, never mind. All right. Because we still need to do some work on the whole town clerk. I mean, even though we may move it to appointed, it's not like poof, magic, July
Right.
2nd, you're now appointed.
Right.
It's still gonna take some time.
It's good. Probably take a year since we don't have last year town meetings
Yep.
approved yet by the state.
So do you want to stop and make any motions before we get into page two?
So I am with the changes we've just made, which is wiping out the select board, lowering consulting to 18. I don't think we touched the others. I think we agree, and tax title down to 7,500. I
And
moved,
Kristen's salary up.
and Kristen's salary to the amount we approved,
Yep.
which is 160.
Yep.
I make the motion to approve lines 1 through 30. And the recommend lines 1 through 30 in the budget.
I will second. No other discussion because we're having tons.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, onward, page two.
Elections was an increase, mostly because we're moving on to some other stuff and some of their storage pieces. I was gonna be okay with that for now, although it's still yellow on my
Yep.
thing to come back and cut later on. Registration, Concom, I worry about wages, but not this year. And so I'm fine with planning and zoning.
Mhm.
I am questioning the community garden.
Okay.
That's the largest expense, the largest actually conversation that the Agriculture Commission does. And although I'm a big fan of community gardens, I really thought that Agriculture Commission was designed to sort of make sure we have the voices of farmers in what we do. And I don't think that's really what they're spending their time doing. And so I don't know if their whole $1,300, how much is community garden and not. And we might not zero it out this year, but I think it's one of those things to start looking at. It is a building and resources that need regular maintenance. It is one of those things that brings in funds that now have to be tracked because people have their applications. And it goes back to every little pool of money we have someone bringing in costs us June's time, or the accountant's office time. And so I would like to seriously explore, although I'm not planning on zeroing it out at this point, but seriously explore whether or not that is a endeavor we should continue on.
Yeah, I mean, for those expenses being a former community garden, I don't know if those costs are asking highway to bring in mulch, any of those costs. I mean, it's probably the water, the irrigation to make sure, popped a leak,
Right.
can't do that. So, but I don't know how much has been spent. I'm hoping that the fence is all good.
As far as I know, it is.
For that, but Kristen, you had also brought up with the community garden about bees, putting in bees, and I don't know
Yes.
if that would need to add to, hey, we need to cordon this off so people aren't opening the drawers going, hey, what's in there?
My understanding is that would be up to the garden plot holder to fence that off, but I will
Really?
double check with Deb.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But again, this becomes liability issues
Yep.
and other stuff. And so I get the idea of community gardens. I generally support it. I just, when we're looking for things that simplify town government, this is something that simplifies town government. I think it allows agriculture to go back. Now, again, I've not run it by them. There's definitely strong supporters of the garden out there, but I think it's something to look at. I don't think I'm doing a vote tonight to reduce that. Public building expenses, I did go back and look, and I know you've lowered some of those numbers.
Yep.
But as we get more efficient, we still are only spending 67,000 on electricity in the year that fiscal year 24, the year that ended. And so, you know, needing $80,000 seems interesting, although it looks like your recommended numbers are, did I change those
Little
down?
lower.
I
You're
recommend
down to
taking,
750?
yeah, 75 and 70. I'm recommending lowering them a bit more.
Because fuel oil, we were down to 47,000, and we should be doing less fuel oil as we go forward anyway. In fiscal year 24, the expenses.
Oh, in
Right.
the budget, on the budget worksheets, the Vadar
So
printout.
I asked, yeah, the Vadar printout. So I keep referring to, I asked, and she gave just the printout of our sort of end of fiscal year 24 numbers, obviously not fully audited and other stuff, but it gets us the right spots. And so I use that for reference and spend so much time looking at what lines we've historically significantly underspent,
Okay.
to see if there's some right sizing there.
I typically go back, and I remember Gina and I sat and talked about electricity and fuel oil, and I think we looked back 5 years. And some years were higher.
Mhm.
I know electricity and fuel oil are not super high right now. It's gas, which we don't have. So that's a good thing in a way, but
Well, and we have a 3-year contract for a flat electricity rate.
yes, we do.
And so although people who aren't on the town plan might see increases here and there, the town plan really is a flat rate for the next 3 years. So we might have signed a really great deal for both the town and residents who are on the town plan, although no one's required to be on it, they can operate whenever they want. So 70 and 50, 70 and 55. I think the 70 number for electricity, I think, is what you ended up.
So you want to take it now from 75 to 70?
Yes, I'd like to take it to 75 to 70. And fuel oil, 47, let's make it, fuel oil, do I make it 55?
Okay.
Oops, it helps if I put it in the right field.
And I'll go back and look because for some reason, there were a couple of years that were a little higher because I remember wanting to scale it back more and there
Yeah.
was a reason that we didn't, but
I mean, it all depends upon the weather. It depends upon what's going on in the world, depends upon how many Arctic
Yep.
blasts you have, so.
And so the only change we made in 31 to 44, which is the rest of 100.
I want to talk about the town report and the communications. I know the town report, we have greatly cut down on instead of mailing 4,000 out the door.
Yep.
That, you know, come pick it up if you want it, let us know. We'll print one off for you. We're gonna have some. Truly, the Powder House News, I know that we have changed from what it is. What's the feeling that you're getting about people who were getting it, liking it, wanting it? For some reason, I was on the list. Now I am not on the list anymore, which is okay. I just go down and steal one off the table. Are we gonna push towards more electronic? Just what is the general feeling about Powder House News?
so I initially cut this budget back to just the town report. And the FinCom actually, when I presented it, said, at least several FinCom members said they love the Powder House News. Would I go back and they're hearing good things about it and more communication is better. So would I go back and take a hard look at what it's actually costing us now?
Yeah.
And I can do, the town report was just under 1,200 last year with inflation and, you know, printing costs going up. I allocated 1,500 for the town report. And it's just under $300 a month to print and mail the few copies that we do of the Powder House News. So I put in 3,500 for the Powder House News, and that's how I got to the 5,000. Initially, I had scaled that back to, I forget if it was 2,000 or 1,500. But that was at the urging of several members of the FinCom said, can you go and take another look at that? Because we think that's a good thing. Not that obviously you have to agree, but I'm just,
No, I mean,
Throw that out there.
and, right, and this one is not a hill to die on, but, you know, I just want to be conscious of that. I understand the need to get information out to the public and, you know, the interweb is not always a good place because a lot of people aren't on it and, you know, dropping copies off too. I just want to make sure that it's money being well spent. Again, 3,500 is not going to make or break the town, but you know, maybe for now we just leave it and this time next year, there'll be more hard, fast numbers on no one really wants this, or holy crap, the entire town wants it now, so.
we really, we cut back on the mailing. You now have to opt in for mailing. And what do we mail, like 25 of newsletters a month?
20 or less.
20 or less.
Yeah.
So
Really?
this is just to really print them and we
Okay.
put them, do you want to explain where we put them?
Sure, we put them in the town hall, 19 Carter, general store, and both the Northbrooks. We put about 25 at each place,
Okay,
Nice.
and they're gone
Yeah, the ones downstairs were gone, what, 2 days after we put them
pretty
out?
quickly.
okay, all right. No, I'm not gonna argue on that one. We'll move on. All right, so do we want to do a vote?
Yeah, I was good to do a vote
Mhm.
then, of that's line 31 to 44. I think the, two changes were, electricity and fuel oil.
Mhm,
I'll make that motion.
okay,
Uh,
I will second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. All right. Public safety.
Wages full and part-time.
Yes.
Now, we regularly talk about how we have vacancies in the department. And I look back and look, last year we gave back like over $100,000 of unspent wages in that line.
Yeah.
And I know we're doing, but I think we're going to regularly have a vacancy.
Mhm.
And I think, but we shouldn't necessarily budget for full stuff. And I would like for next year potentially have a bigger, I don't have a sense of like how the town is staffed police wise and why. But this late the budget process, there is no point in having that conversation now just because it's just to it. But I think really in the fall at some point to have a better conversation of what is the right staffing, how many people we need. This does not add, the number that is in the recommended is not adding any more police officers, correct?
That is only adding the second half of the 11th position that was half funded
Right.
in last year's budget.
Right, the person started.
That he's
yeah, yeah.
advertised and the person is in the academy.
Yep. I'm quite whether or not, again, if 1.3 million is fully staffed,
Mhm.
whether or not we budget, you know, 100,000 less than that, recognize there will be vacancies at some point.
I mean, I think last year was a bit unusual. We had a long-term IOD, injury, long-term injury that was out for over a year. We had 2 people that left and it took a while to fill those positions. Then we added a 4th position. So we actually went with 4, if not 5 vacancies, last year. So the department was literally running it with, I believe, 6 people last year. And I know that was a huge strain on the department. Their unfilled shifts were really high. So the only concern I would have there, and I'm happy to look at more with Eric, is, you know, their need and their goal is really to have the 11. So we cut back on the overtime.
Right.
Because that's where you really start
Right. and
racking
so
it up.
I feel because you had all those vacancies, when they filled the shifts, they filled them with overtime. And even with overtime in those shifts, we only spent $1 million of the 1.1 million that was budgeted.
Right, because we didn't have enough people to fill them all. So many shifts went unfilled every month.
Keep talking amongst yourself, Eric.
And so, in his, and so we might want to add to his monthly report then, how many unpaid shifts, the unfilled shifts there were, which is already in the fire department report.
Yep.
And then the impact of unpaid shifts. Like, again, fire department is much more direct. An unfilled shift means that your response time will be longer to a fire. You know, a response time to some police calls, actual response time probably doesn't matter much. Some, it's obviously still quite critical, you know,
Right.
For everything I've seen, the response are appropriate. They're not dropping everything and racing over to Highland Commons for a shoplifting report. They are when there's a major accident, and so that's.
We
But-
also receive and also provide a fair amount of mutual aid. And I can
Right.
tell you if those shifts are understaffed, the fear is, do we have and
Right,
we did
right.
have a situation.
Usually it has to
where
be
we
both
were
directions. Yes,
in
yeah.
Last year,
Yeah.
the station, last week, rather.
And so I'd like to figure out a way to lower that 1.3 number. It is 108, it's a 15% increase, which is a large increase on a large number.
It is. And the one thing with that is that it is all contractual. It is all the stipends. The newer
Yep.
officers coming in have higher degrees,
Yep.
so that results in a higher stipend.
Right, so it could be at some point we have to just shrink the size of the department to lower it.
Hmm.
And so for now, I'll leave that number as is.
Did he put his car through? Didn't we give him money for a car, Eric? Or was that the cruiser that's out there now?
Oh, we did use ARPA funds
Yeah,
for our cruiser.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming in or very shortly, or it has just come in because it took that long.
Okay.
A similar argument for fire full-time and part-time wages. We have a lot of open shifts. It's been open shifts from the time I have been here.
Mhm.
I don't imagine that is going to change much. I don't think I would change our staffing patterns. I think I would acknowledge that we have shifts that go unfilled. And instead of raising the number up 20,000, I would reduce it by 20,000 and just put a $590,000 number in it.
Will that need to go back to fire, Mike?
Yeah, and the reason that I would be a little bit concerned about that one is because he did bring on 2 new full-time people and now the open shifts are greatly reduced. If you remember his last report, he has almost all shifts filled had almost all shifts filled for January. And I believe it's the same for February. So that might actually have to result in a cut of a position would be my only concern there.
Again, the goal is that historically, we have turnover in the town. We're an entry-level town. People leave for towns that will go back to at some point during fiscal year 26, where we will have the empty shifts and not necessarily budgeting for it, because historically, police and fire, full-time and part-time wages have had substantial amounts of underspending. And so trying to find a way to right-size that a little bit more, with the idea being that if it happens to fill all the shifts for the year, that we'll have to pull potentially from reserves or transfer somewhere else. But in years, we have not fully staffed both police and fire to a level where we've spent the money that we've budgeted.
That is true. I do think the most recent union contracts really tried to address that so that we can attract and retain. And I think the select board made the right move in making those commitments. My only concern there is that that's going to result in higher expenditures over these years, because this is the first year of the new police contract and we have 1 year of the fire under our belt.
I would rather wait to get input from Fire Mike and Eric
Yep.
before we make any changes to those two.
Building inspector, I don't know why it's still full-time. When we were building Highland Commons, the amount of building permits we had was very high and it actually made sense. But if you look at the building logs, we're bringing in a couple thousand a month in inspector fees. And so if we're bringing in, let's say 25,000 for the year inspector fees, spending $140,000 on wages doesn't seem to make sense. And so I really would like to figure out a way to go back to not having a full-time building inspector and going back to the inspector being paid, was it 80 or 85% of the fees that came in?
Is that how it was until, when did that change?
Late teens.
Yeah.
Because when Highland Commons really was beginning to get there, because we had River Bridge and Highland Commons sort of building at about the same time, and just
Okay.
the fees were so much that someone was going to be here all the time. And actually, at one point, it looked like that the fees, if you paid a full-time person, the fees were going to be more than what they were bringing in. But we knew at some
Okay.
point that it's going to go. And again, I've been looking for the last year, and it's a couple thousand a month.
Right.
And so again, paying $140,000 for an inspector and an assistant. For someone that's only bringing $25,000 a year, the intent was all of these inspectors, there's 3, the revenue from the permits would pay for their salaries. And I don't think that's happening anymore.
One thing to note on the admin does ZBA, assist some ZBA assistants as well. So, but I understand your point on the building inspector. I also know we're coming up on a time for a change when the building inspector is considering retiring.
I think he
So
had retired and we begged him to come back.
we did, and I hear that may be coming up again
Yep.
at some point.
Yep.
So do we make that change at that time, or do we make it now?
Well, and again, this is the budget that starts July 1, and so you, even if this is passes May, we'd have some time, and maybe there's a transition number. I just made up a number of cutting it in half, but that's still twice the amount of money we're bringing in fees. And so I think that still allows us to have him here for a bit. But it's also removing, again, it goes back to removing a full-time position, lowers risk to retirement, lowers health insurance coverages, it lowers the number of checks and other stuff. It's just finding a way to make it work. And so I was putting in a number of, I mean, I cut them both in half. So, 50 and 16, which is not really quite half.
Does this open up an opportunity to work with Hudson, to work with Clinton, to work with neighboring towns?
They're
I
too
can't-
big. They need their own full-time. We'd have to find another small community perhaps we could partner with.
Mhm.
My fear when it comes to that is that we may lose our full-time inspector, and there aren't many people that are willing to work part-time because typically a building inspector wants the benefits. I could talk to CMRPC about regionalization. That wouldn't hurt. And there may be a possibility there, but I can tell you, I see emails coming from the STAM, the small town administrators, all the time saying, can we borrow your building inspector? We lost ours and we can't find one. So that is a position along with treasurer that is really, really, really hard to fill. So my only concern there would just be, are we, chasing away somebody and then we're not gonna be able to find someone?
Yeah, but are we, I think we have to bite the bullet, because are we gonna then spend $150,000 of the tax dollars? Because we don't want to address a problem the town is facing. And I think it's also worthy of, bring in our state officials. Why is this position not something that really can happen around the state? And what can the states do to make it? Those building rules and laws are so obnoxious. It's hard for anyone to just keep up with them all, never mind sort of fairly enforce them.
All right, so I want to do a time check. It's 9:18. Do we want to make our way down to public works and facilities and then stop for the night? It's only a few more. It's plumbing and gas,
yes, yeah,
electrical,
yeah.
okay.
So are we putting some of these on hold then? Or where are we dealing with?
I honestly would rather wait on the building inspector. I don't want to cut it and force him out where he says, see you later, bye. I would rather get a little bit more information if you can hunt and peck around and see if there are towns and we can regionalize with them, I know that Boylston is going like gangbusters and they put up all those apartments and things like that, but kind of like with us, that stuff comes to an end. You're not going to continually put in multi-high-rise apartments and other things. So you run out of land. So if we could just put a pin in it for now.
Yep.
Okay.
Most of it's good. Communications full-time wages is whom?
That is the public safety admin, and then the expenses is the regional dispatch.
Yeah, I know the regional, the expenses were.
So public
And so
safety
if you
admin
put it
does
under
police and
communications because
fire.
it does police and fire, so it didn't belong really under either one. Okay.
Correct.
I knew that had to be a good answer, so I didn't change the number. I wanted to be able to answer who.
Sure.
All right. So any changes in lines 200, in lines 45 through 61?
No.
Okay. All right. So we have 11 minutes, Scott. Let's go.
I have no problem with highway, and I have no problem with snow and ice.
Wait, can I back up a second? I'm sorry. Are you guys are approving lines 45 through 61?
For now, until we can get more information. So
Okay.
not
Yeah.
a vote to approve, but if you could go back to Fire Mike and Eric and
Okay.
then poke around for
Yeah.
building
Got it.
commissioner.
Okay.
And here's a question, do we need a building commissioner or do we just need building inspectors?
We have to have a commissioner.
Okay,
Otherwise, we have to try to steal somebody else's, and that's tough.
bad. Okay, all right, just checking.
So if I leave out 45 through 53 right now, are we comfortable with the rest?
Like leave alone, you're gonna find other things to,
No, like, don't, you're not gonna vote them right now.
no, we're not gonna vote them right now.
No.
But are you gonna vote 54 through 61 is my question then?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Seconded.
Uh, Aye.
54 to 61.
54 to 61.
Motion and a second. All right, okay, here we go. All right, so Public Works. You're okay?
I'm okay, snow and salt,
Yep.
because you can deficit spend, it doesn't matter. Streetlights. One, I don't know why we just don't turn them all off, but two, looking at, we spend $3,000 a year on streetlights. I don't think we need to budget 9,000. Somebody maybe should drive around town and
Is
keep
that-
inventory, because,
How many streetlights do we have? Because I get
Right.
ridiculed for that all the time. Like they're in the center of town and then that's it.
yeah.
Do you have one on your road?
See, should we turn them all off?
Is that a
I think
question
you'd
for the
want to talk
energy?
to public safety about that. There may be some concerns about not having any streetlights on roads.
I mean, most street, to be fair, we have what, some 42 miles of roads in town, and streetlights cover maybe a mile if I'm being generous.
Maybe that could be a question for Tim
Yeah.
to find out why streetlights are at 9.
So even if we don't turn them off, we're spending 3,000 a year on electricity on those, not 9, and so I think we could lower the
Yeah.
number to 3,500.
I'd go a little bit higher. I'd go 4 just in case.
Sure. Easy.
What line number is that?
Number 69?
69.
I'm gonna share my
The
screen again. Give me a second.
next really fun one, and we can stop at the end of this, is I would like to zero out the transfer station and close it. It is used by a minority of town. It is an area of high liability. It is an area of lots of oversight necessary. It is buildings that need maintenance and repair on the facility study. And I could not, and many towns around us don't have one. And so because which makes me believe that it's not required by state law to have it. And so spending that money and time and energy and legal liability just doesn't feel worth it to me. And I use the transfer station.
So we would need Board of Health to chime in on what it would cost. Oh, so you're not even saying town pickup. You're saying close it, go find your own.
Yep. Which a lot of towns do.
Oof, do we have cost estimates on what it would cost for private to come through Berlin?
It's all
2/3 of
different. You
town,
have to hire your
right,
own.
2/3 of town already have private pickup.
Well, I go to the dump.
Right. So most of us in the room here go to the transfer station, but
Yep,
we're
a
about
majority of town takes care of their own.
Including recycling. People don't tend to
Yep.
recycle as they'll private contract for
Yep,
recycle too.
yep,
Okay.
Yep, your private contract will pick up you. My neighbors have dumpsters or trash things for both. All the apartments in town are forced to have something and don't use the transfer station anyway.
May I counter your proposal?
Boom.
I did actually have an idea, and I put it in my TA report. I looked at their revolving fund. This is the first year,
Mhm.
and it came in much higher than anticipated. We used to allocate, I believe it was about 130,000 in offset receipts, and we're up to about 275 in the revolving fund. So I was proposing close to zeroing out expenses and seeing if those could come from the revolving fund. I had reached out. I need to talk to the Board of Health.
Right, but those two lines don't include the health insurance and benefits, including Worcester retirement. Does not include the liability insurance because of what, if you look at the accidents we've had in town, transfer station is responsible for a lot of them. You know, if you look at the facility study, the transfer station buildings are some of the, they don't require tons because they're obviously way simpler things, but it's a substantial piece out there.
Well, and you also have to consider the conversation that was just had regarding the comments of it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm thinking,
Right.
where?
Right.
What money tree is gonna be shaking on
Sadly,
that?
The landfill
That's
side
the
of that's gonna happen no matter whether or not we have a transfer station, but at least we don't have other things up there. We don't have the inspection that we luckily managed to pass apparently without having to do much out there.
Mhm.
But that, you know, again, the Board of Health could focus on other things. I see Board of Health members up there having to staff it when they can't have employees come in. The number of times you've had to try to hire things up there, and that's turnover again. And it goes back to all the little things that add up to run it, not just those two line items. And I'm totally fine not having a vote on this.
No, I know that. My only concern is communication, because I don't want folks driving up on July 2nd and going,
Oh, yeah.
can't get in. I didn't know.
Well,
Time.
Yeah, yeah, on highway time. And then, and so, one of the things I want to talk, and a strategy about some of this
Yeah, yeah.
is that, even if we agreed to zero this out, I would want to make sure that the requested dollar amount is still what is requested to make it happen. So that even if we zeroed it out, that someone on the floor of town meeting has the legal ability to say, I think you made a mistake, I would like to increase this dollar amount back to the requested amount.
So that would ultimately be up to FinCom because it is FinCom's budget. So they would take your recommendations into account and decide what budget they want to present to town meeting.
Right, and so even if they presented a zero, I'd like the requested number to still be there, because on the floor of town meeting,
Oh.
you can only change a number up to the amount originally requested. And since we're the select board, potentially, and this is a weird one because it's officially a Board of Health one, but as a select board, I don't want that number to be zero, because that means that on the floor of town meeting, people can't go, you folks are crazy, we need the transfer station. And I'm gonna be fine, because the number of times you and I have been stopped about how horrible our taxes are, how outrageous our spending is, I want people to have to go to the floor of town meeting and say, I want to spend more money. And so I would like us to potentially have the lower budget and force people on the floor of town meeting to say, I think we should spend money on it. And I would be fine to be wrong on it, but then I don't want to be stopped on the street saying, why did our tax go? The tax went up because the people who went to town meeting argued that we should spend money on things. And again, I don't think there's any fraud, waste, or abuse happening up there. I think it is a good town service. I think as a communications platform is decent. But if we're trying to lower taxes, we're trying to simplify government, we should stop doing things we're not legally required to do.
So the budget that would go in the town meeting warrant would have a requested column and a recommended column.
Right, which they do now. And I want to just mention a couple of those. We don't need to discuss or vote on them, because I think if I say it at a public meeting, it is easier for me to talk about it in town.
Yes.
And not think that we're trying to do other stuff. And so if I look at other things future in the budget, that I'd love to question the need for, includes Neshoba nursing. Because I think that is not the Neshoba Board of Health, because I know we get a bunch of, but the nursing for the flu shots, the COVID shots, and the rabies stuff. I would love to question the van and whether or not if we just had a pool of rideshare receipts, we could do it cheaper and easier and more convenient for most of the folks. I sadly feel the same way about zeroing out recreation, cultural council, and the Memorial Day.
Recreation, cultural, and memorial.
Because we don't do the Memorial Day event anymore. It's something tiny and private.
Believe that pays for the flags.
I can't imagine we're spending $2,000 on flags.
They've been maxing out their budget, or is it the graves?
It's
I'll
probably
find
the
out.
flags on the graves.
It's-
Because every excuse me, every veteran in town gets
Yep.
a new flag. I'm having a wicked brain cramp, so I'm just gonna ask. Part-time wages for COA?
That's the counts, that's the van drivers.
Oh, that we can't find.
We have 4 interviews.
Really? Wow, okay.
But you see, that's $33,000. The amount of rideshare coupons we could pay for people, or taxi rides we could pay for people, is substantial at 33,000, and not have to. When was the last time the COA director was not spending time interviewing van riders? Like, they could actually do things that help our seniors, which the van sort of does, but we have other things out there, and you know, and some of the expense of that and replacement of the van was on a recent warrant that didn't make it to town meeting, but yes, we'll come back and talk about some
Okay.
of those. And I can now feel I can.
Yeah, and thank you for wages on part-time. I'm looking at it and went, not a clue as to what that one was, so.
Oh, that's fair.
All right, well, we've done well, so.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions for line 73 through 83, or is it more just, let's have a more continued chat? Well, no, 69 went down. Oh, that was the other section. Never mind.
Could you vote on 62 through 69?
I have no problem voting on 62 and 69, with 69 going down to 30.
45?
What is it?
4,000.
4,000. Yep.
Yep.
I'll make that motion.
And I will second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, we've made some.
What did 69 go down to?
4,000.
4,000. All right, well, we've made headway. There's lots more to do. Tomorrow night, again, we highly recommend people to tune in and or go to the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee meeting where they're going to discuss the budget that they will present, which at the end of the day is going to have potentially a significant impact on that. So would love to have more people there. Before we go, we have one more thing that's quick, speedy. Did you ever hear back from Al and or Aaron about them coming to next Monday to provide us a summary of tomorrow night's meeting?
They wrote back and said they were working on a date
Okay,
that would work for them.
all right. Okay.
I do want to note too that a late email came in this evening that FinCom does not have a quorum for Wednesday, so FinCom will not be meeting this Wednesday. So you will be able to make the rest of your recommendations before
Okay.
the next FinCom meeting.
All right.
But then they will only have 2 meetings after that to
Right.
finalize everything, so.
I think that we can then cancel the select board meeting for Wednesday now as well, since the whole reason the select board
Yes.
meeting was is that.
Was to go,
You and
yeah.
I both
Yes.
could attend the
Okay.
FinCom meeting, so if there's no FinCom meeting, there's no select board meeting. I know. Darn, I canceled gaming Wednesday night too. Maybe I can get everybody back.
You can get everybody back on. All right, so we thank you, appreciate all the feedback on this. So our last one, that we can probably do in 30 seconds or less, are the board questions and liaison updates. Go.
Okay, this is not a 30-second one, so we'll bring it back, but I'd like to have, I should look more to you, a conversation of what we believe Kristen's role should be for non-select board stuff. And so I sent you the email about it, but that when people have questions about how like the Board of Health or the Assessors Board or let's say the clerk's office, but sort of independent bodies that don't report through us or officially through Kristen, I think it's important for them to be able to go to Kristen for help and advice, especially on legal items.
Okay,
But I think when it comes to reporting back to the citizenry, that it really should be those boards that report back. So it's not like the town administrator told me X, when it really is not within the purview of the town administrator to have those type of opinions.
all right, so how would you
I say that
classify
sounds
that?
way-
'Cause I'll-
That sounds way meaner than it was meant to be.
It's not.
Kristen was trying to be really helpful, and I think it got her into some trouble in an area that she shouldn't have needed to venture into in the first place.
All right, so,
And the-
I've got broad shoulders.
Right,
but-
when citizens get upset with an elected body
Yep.
or a staff person doesn't report to the town administrator should not necessarily take that heat. And if people in town are upset with independently elected bodies, they should go to those independent elected body meetings and voice that.
so how do you want to put that down? Because I'll plop it on for the next meeting.
Ties in with one of my goals, actually, maybe roles of,
You could even say a puzzling, how to support the non-select board staff.
Okay.
The
yes.
staff that don't report through the town administrator. Yeah, I
What
mean,
was
elected, the other elected committees.
Staff that reports to elected
Yeah,
boards.
and you
that
can
are-
figure out over the
Okay.
next week or two, so
Yep.
how to better word that. But I like to figure out where we think those boundaries are to provide them support, but not bring Kristen down rabbit holes that
Okay,
take her away from other stuff that she should be working on.
Sure. And when it comes to legal, though, I definitely don't want independent elected bodies contacting town council, just
No.
because
Yeah.
there's no way to track
Yeah.
that, and that is
Yeah.
our budget.
Yeah. I think it's trying to find where that right balance is so that you have some
Mhm.
guidance and that we know what's coming out.
all right. So do you have any other board questions, liaison updates?
No, we have to make sure that the ballot question stuff is on the,
Mhm.
just to make sure it's properly worded and
Yeah,
our
we're
votes
working on that.
are correct.
We've been working with Eloise
Yep.
on that.
Okay, all right, the only thing really worth of note, for me was that, I just came this afternoon from the West Boylston, the ring ceremony. West Boylston Select Board was there, Town Administrator for Boylston was there, all the kids were there. I took pictures and sent them over to Dee so we can print them out and get them up on the board. Dear God, those young men who are now wearing 3 rings on their fingers, talk about just like making trail marks as they drag down the hall. They're gorgeous, they're heavy. I tried to steal one, I got caught. No, I'm kidding. We all tried them on. We all tried them on and did like the look. So just a very proud moment for those young gentlemen. And there are 3 from Berlin. We will get the names of them and we will get them out and posted. But everything else, Concom zip it along. It's frozen. They really can't do a lot. Rec, I'm meeting with on Thursday to talk about space. So we will resurrect that at some point. But other than that, boom chakalaka, I'll take a motion to
So
close the
moved.
meeting.
To close.
Seconded, and